Ahoyo! Ahoyo! Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Pearl the Otter, your Sea Otter Sea Captain VTuber. Welcome, welcome. Lovely to see all of you. Hi, hi. Ahoyo Reese. Hi, Billy Dunton. Hi, Rishi. Hello. Kudai. Hello, hello. Otter General, fellow otter. Welcome. I am an otter sailor. Well, captain. Welcome, welcome aboard Lacework, Drunken Salamander, Ion, lovely to see you. Man Bands, hello, hello. Hello, Thundead King. Hello, Arya. Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Today I am going to be doing some ASMR book reading. So that is what we're going to do today. 1 second on that, I will do the purr, but you guys are going to want the 3DO for that. So, just going to do a little bit of, house bookkeeping real quick before we get to the actual ASMR portion with their 3DO. So, today we'll be reading Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice into the 3DO. There's going to be, soft tapping, page turning, maybe some scratching lightly on it with 3DO. Yeah, 3DO. It's a microphone with ears. It makes things sound like I'm right against your head. It's that's what it does. Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you, thank you. You can't stay long, but you wanted to check in on the stream. Yay! Well, thank you, thank you. I appreciate it. Right now, I'm gonna do a little bit of the tummy pat. Welcome aboard. Those of you who came in last time we were at port. So, welcome, welcome, the Otter General, Trash Can Degenerate, and Fun Time Wild Wolf to the SS Otterwoodly Traveler. And with that, we are going to go heading over to basically the ASMR screen where we're going to have the book and the 3DO will be active. Also, thank you, thank you. I am utterly adorable. It's generally how it works. Hi, Cecily Fox, and thank you so much for 5 months. 5 months. Mwah, 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 mwah. ASMR is going to be a little early today because I had a collab. It's at like midnight my time. And I was like, shit, I forgot. I'm stupid. I'm very cute, but scary as Yandere. No, I'm not. No, I'm not scary. Not scary at all. But yeah, just give me a hot minute. Yeah, I forgot. It's okay. I remember later. But I am gonna go switching on over to the ASMR screen. So please give me a moment. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. And now I can do that purr that I had earlier. Also, thank you for stopping by. I was really gonna go with that joke title, but then I was talking about, wait, Mr. Darcy, I do not Darcy the point of not taking multiple wives, sir. Obviously, that's the answer. Look, Elle, I have a limit of how many times I can put a character into the thing. I had other shit I had to put in there. Pride and Prejudice. Paquin. Here comes the boy. Hello, boy. Welcome. He is here he is. Hi, Paquin. We're gonna read about, getting wed. Getting hitched. Welcome, Raiders, and welcome, Paquin. Welcome, Paquin. Let me just scoot my book over here a little bit better. But yeah, we will be reading Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Not part of Keep Austen Weird. So let's start. I'm going to be doing some accents with that, as well as I have some bites to do. Bucket, you want that here? Because guess what? It's not yours anymore. It's mine. My hair now. I own this now. It's mine. Yum, 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 yum. Yum, 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 yum. Yum. Okay, and the chitter, and then we have to actually start the book. You guys won't let me go. Thank you for the headbands. I appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, here we go. Time for book now. Is a leather-bound book of the complete novels of Jane Austen, which means it's more than just Pride and Prejudice. We have Sense and Sensibility, my personal favorite, Pride and Prejudice, Mansfield Park, Emma, Persuasion, and Northanger Abbey. Just don't bite my arm. Probably feels like somebody nibbles on my arm. No, I only nibble on ears, and if you're really bad, your nose. But welcome, 8VA tour. Hello, Housemaster. Hello. All right, just a brief introduction about who Jane Austen is. It's a truth universally acknowledged that a collection of novels of Jane Austen must be in want of an introduction. The task is not an easy one, since, despite her enduring popularity, Jane Austen was writing in a world, and for an audience that were vastly different from today's. This brief essay is intended to introduce the reader to the life and times of Jane Austen and show how, even though her themes, love, friendship, gossip, and the difference between appearances and reality are eternal, the circumstances of her characters must contend with were particular to her time and her place. Congrats to my Ashwat. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm very excited to see my baby once it gets here. I'm gonna hug it and snuggle it and smooch its face. That's what I'm gonna do. You feel like you're in English again? Well, I can always sound more European if you'd like, if it makes it a little bit better while I'm reading this. Doting otter mama. Yes, I am a doting otter mother. This is my child now. I must take care of it. Oh god, it's gonna sound super English. That's basically all it's gonna be, is just me, super English. Moreover, the ways in which Austen dealt with the unequal status of women in her time, both in her work and her own life, have led to many to claim her as a feminist. Well, before her time, her heroines were not mere background in drama where men move the action or stock characters who behave in a stereotypical way. Far from it. In fact, Elizabeth Bennet, Emma Woodhouse, and Marianne Dashwood are, in their own right, their own people. They have thoughts, feelings, preferences, and judgments. In Emma Woodhouse's case, sometimes foolish ones. In this emphasis on women's subjectivity, their fiction has been immense. But Jane Austen was not precociously modern. Rather, she did what women in similar positions have done throughout the ages. She strategically managed her talents and advantages to make her way in the world. Also, welcome aboard Ninja Joker 42 to the SS Otterworldly Traveller. Please enjoy a vacation to the to the soft and comfy. I do appreciate it. Who turned poach autobritish? No, it's just something I can do. I can sound very convincingly British. I can impersonate a British person. But only a posh one. My Cockney needs a little bit more work. Need a little bit more Catherine Tate tapes. But the life and times of Jane Austen. Jane Austen was born on December 16th, 1775, in Steventon, Hampshire, England. Her father, George, was a clergyman in the Anglican Church. By the way, Anglican Church, fun story fact, was made basically as a Catholic ripoff because Queen Mary, Bloody Mary, Mary the First of England, was a devout Catholic, and her brother wanted to go entirely the opposite direction. And wanted to get rid of the Catholicism in England. So their sister, once she got the throne, I believe it was Queen Elizabeth, established a church that was kind of like a happy marriage. It was essentially Catholicism without all the magic and the guilt. Yes, it was Catholic versus Protestant. And the Anglican Church came out as a way to be like, okay, well, we're no longer pursuing the Catholics, but we don't want to be Protestant, so here's a happy medium. Yes, because King Henry couldn't keep it in his pants because he decided he wanted to marry 8 women. The Catholicism we have at home. It's none of the magic, none of the guilt, all the same ceremony. All of it's the same. But that's basically the congratulations. He was a clergyman of this particular time. 6, actually. I thought it was 8. I thought it was Henry VIII had 8 wives. Or did he just, impregnate 2? go, Otter Chitter, and thank you, Agno, for the 4 months. 4 months of loyal sailor. Thank you. Mm. 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 Everybody got two extra kisses. There you go. The chitters have to be one of your favorite parts of the stream. Well, they are my favorite noise to make, so that's generally why we make them. That's why I made them so cheap. Also, Plumpy Bumples, 45 seconds is not enough time for comfy. So you were going to make an otter pun anyway. But I'm glad that you like it, 10 hats. I tip my hat to you. Huh? Huh? And it's gone. Alright. Both he and her mother, Cassandra, Nele, came from old and distinguished families, but neither would expect to inherit much wealth. George's income was only £200 per year, only twice that of a skilled laborer, and 1/5 of even poorer members of the gentry class, about whom Austen would later write. She had 7 siblings, beside her elder sister, also named Cassandra, taken after their mother, were her brothers. James, who would succeed his father as vicar of Stevington, George, who was developmentally disabled, Edward, who became a wealthy landowner, Henry, who went to Oxford but joined the army instead of the clergy, and then later to become a banker, and Francis and Charles, who both became naval officers. You are listening to it? No, you make the pun. No, I make the pun. Well, that seems just utterly ridiculous to ask me to make one at any point in time. I mean, it doesn't seem fair to ask me something like that. A family of hard workers. Hello, Pony Sulphur. Hello. A family of hard workers, yes. And enjoy listening while you play your master duel. Owing to her family's straitened circumstance, Jane Austen's formal education was limited. She had only 3 years of formal schooling, interrupted by a near fallout bout of typhus. Austen, nevertheless, received a good education for the time. Her father made extra money as a schoolmaster and had a sizable library. In fact, young Jane seemed to be something of a progeny, who from an early age entertained a social circle by reading from her compositions and acting in an amateur theatrical productions, especially comedies, with her family and friends. Such performances were very fashionable in the late 18th century. Austen was also encouraged in her literary aspirations by her father and by Anne Lefroy, wife of her father's colleague and herself a published author. Thank you for the stretchy stretch, and thank you for the ear-time scritches. I do appreciate it. Alright, time for the stretchy part. Stretchy. I need to find a better book holder so I can keep this sucker open. Ugh. Here you go, vigilantes. Manga, you can keep the very English book open. The irony is not lost upon me. But Pearl, I earned your otter chitters within the 45 seconds, so you're already comfy. Well, then you just got a free pun, regardless. Welcome. Is it look loose or is it euk loose? Either way, welcome aboard to the SS Otterwoodly Traveler. Please enjoy your vacation. Thank you so much for following. We are doing a little bit of book reading ASMR. So there will be some page turning, some scratching, and mostly just me reading the introduction of Jane Austen as well as Pride and Prejudice. Among Austen's early works was Lady Susan, an epistolary novel, a story told through the letters allegedly sent by the characters.
She wrote between 1793 and 1795 about a cunning, manipulative, and seductive widow. In its cynicism, Lady Susan is quite unlike Austen's rather more cheerful and later works. Eleanor and Marianne was another early epistolary novel, though no manuscript survives. It's later reworked into the core of Sense and Sensibility. In 1796, she began her first impressions, which later became Pride and Prejudice. Her father attempted to have it published in London, but it was rejected. 2 years later, in 1798, she began Susan, which later became Northanger Abbey, though the London publisher Benjamin Crosby paid £10 for the copyright. The novel remained unpublished until Austen bought it back from him in 1816. Jane Austen's Steventon years were also marked by her own only known love affair. Tom Lefroy, the nephew of Anne Lefroy, came to visit in the winter of 1795 to 1796, during the interval between finishing his college education and beginning law school. However, neither Austen's families nor Lefroy's were able to afford a marriage. With 5 elder sisters and 6 younger siblings, it was imperative that Lefroy make a good match. Austen nonetheless apparently thought much of Lefroy, mentioning him 2 years later in a letter. In his later years, after becoming Lord Chief Justice of Ireland, which at that time was a British colony, Lefroy, for his part, admitted that he had indeed been in love with Austen. He had travelled to England to pay his respects when he had learned of her death, and later purchased one of her publisher's rejection letters for the early version of Pride and Prejudice. Name of the story. We're going to be reading Pride and Prejudice. So right now we're just kind of reading a little bit of an introduction of who Jane Austen is. We are reading from the complete novel of Jane Austen, which is a leather brown book that I've got right here. And that's what we're reading. I am God. Also, welcome, James. Lovely to see you. Lovely to see you. Thank you so much for all of your love and supportive vibes. I always appreciate it. Thank you, thank you. It is classy, and it's also public domain, so I have no problem in being able to read it without anybody getting all sorts of angry. No angry. Just happy reading. Because a public domain is great. I like the fact that he went on to buy the rejection letter. I'm just imagining he's just like, yeah, fool, you could have been making all this money, but instead you rejected her. So you know what? This is literally proof of how stupid you are. It's like the world's most passive aggressive thing. Also, thank you, Safroy, for continuing the gift sub that you got from Thunderlane. I appreciate it. Thank you, thank you. Mwah. Alright. In fact, Jane Austen would receive only one known offer of a marriage in her life from Harris Bigwether, the younger brother of 2 family friends, in 1802. Bigwether was a wealthy but unattractive and somewhat boorish. While Austen initially accepted, she was quickly regretted her decision and withdrew her consent. What would have become of Jane Austen's literary career had she married is, of course, a question that we will never be able to answer. Perhaps he wanted to keep proof of her existence that he truly loved her. That's true. That's true. But also, I just feel like he also was to the guy who rejected the letter, how dare you reject her? She was a genius and you are a fool. It reminds me of that one what is this? Don't want to interrupt. We are reading the complete novels of Jane Austen. We're going to be reading Pride and Prejudice today. Right now we're just reading a little bit of who Jane Austen was, sort of introduction. It's a few pages, kind of giving it a little bit of history of when she was alive, what times this were when they were written. Yeah, it's a prelude. Yeah, it's a little introduction. Before we get into reading Pride and Prejudice. Also, welcome aboard, Gustavo, to the SS Unworldly Traveler. Please enjoy your vacation. Thank you so much for the follow. I truly appreciate it. Mwah. There you go. All right. In contrast to Austen's nonstop writing from her early adolescence to the age of 25, the years of 1800 to 1804 were less productive. George Austen retired from the clergy and moved to his family to resort to his town of Bath. Scholars speculate whether his daughter's lack of productivity was due to the Depression or a busy social life. But it was only until 1804 that she began writing The Watsons, a novel about an impoverished clergyman with four unmarried daughters, a project she abandoned when her own father died in 1805. It was her father's death and her desire to provide for her family that likely renewed Jane Austen's drive to become a professional writer. Though her four brothers pledged their financial support, she, her mother, and her sisters were forced to move frequently. Fortunately, Thomas and Catherine Knight, the distant relatives who had given George Austen his position as vicar in Steventon, were childless, and adopted Jane's elder brother Edward as their heir around 1783. Thomas died in 1794, leaving the estate to Catherine for her lifetime. However, Catherine decided to move to Canterbury and gave the family estate Chawton House to Edward on the condition that he change his surname to Austen Knight. Edward was thus able to provide for his sisters and mother a house to live in up until 1809. Jane Austen's dear friend Martha Lloyd also lived with them. Colloquially known as the cottage, this was a large 17th century brick building with a short walk from her brother's great house. Basically, it was the offshoot. That's where some fun backstory is in these large houses. If you've ever watched Downton Abbey, they had Downton House, which is where the Countess lived. Essentially, there would be a great house, an abbey, or what you would like to call it, and then there would be a smaller home just off to the side, usually for the elder couple as the new heirs took the residence of the main house. They would live there until they died, and then the people in the great house would have children, and when their children overtook the estate, then the couple would then move into the smaller house and live there. And that's generally how that was done, and people in the gentry class or the higher middle class would operate, basically giving these houses to their next of kin and holding on to them for generations. It was while Austen was living a quiet life in Chawton that the publisher Thomas Egerton began publishing her novels, first Sense and Sensibility in 1811, then Pride and Prejudice 2 years later, and Mansfield Park in 1814. They were all received, garnering fans that included the Prince Regent, the future George IV, George III, who had suffered from mental illness, was then deemed unfit to rule. Yes, George IV. Austen's satirical plan of a novel, according to the hints of various quarters, not published until 1926, was a progeny of suggestions from her next work to make the prince's librarian the unctuous James Starner Clark, who had invited her to visit the Prince Regent and suggested she dedicate the forthcoming Emma to his patron. Requests that she could hardly refuse, even though she did not approve of the future George IV's dissolute lifestyle. Emma, on the other hand, was released by John Murray, who had published Sir Walter Scott and Lord Byron in 1815. Murray offered Austen a small margin of £450 for the manuscript, plus the copyrights of Mansfield Park and Sense and Sensibility. She had retained that of Pride and Prejudice, but she instead chose to publish at her own expense and pay Murray a 10% commission. Interestingly, Austen's name did not appear on her own books in her lifetime. The byline merely read, "A lady, a gentlewoman's accomplishments writing." Watercolor, music, were only intended to enhance her charms for a potential suitor. Of course, a well-born woman would never do such things professionally publishing. Anonymously was a means of maintaining this fiction, but Austen was interested in money. Learning from her experience with Susan, she did not sell the copyright, but rather the books were sold on commission, with the publisher fronting publication expenses and paying Austen royalties. If the book did not sell, she would have been liable for the losses because women could not sign contracts. Her brother Henry had to act as her agent and back her financially. Yes, so women were not allowed to hold land or really property outside of their dowry during this period in time, in which they would still have to offer up the dowry to a suitor, basically paying them to take them as a wife. And that is a big part of a conflict in Pride and Prejudice. If you didn't know, we will be discussing what a dowry is and how it works and what it means. Basically, it is something that the family collectively makes money for each female child to give to a male suitor, basically cementing their. These are odd facts at all. they're facts. They're just not about otters. I can make other facts. I can teach you other things. I can teach you a history. Who says I can't? These are free facts. Free, comfy facts about history and Victorian times and things. Come on. Otters who studied human history. Yeah, I had to learn about that. How do you think I fit in so well? Maybe not socially. Were I good at history? Was I good? Yeah, actually, I was really good at history, English, during otter school. I was also good at art and singing. So when there was a little bit of a theatrical production, I would also present in that. The only thing I wasn't really well at was math. Math was hard. There were so many rules, and I couldn't remember them all. I knew the basics of addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Outside of that purview, I was like,
okay, why is there numbers now and letters? Why is my homework like alphabet soup?
Test was American war was considered a medicine war. Hint. He was president at the time. Pearl could sing. I'm shocked.
Yeah, I got this annoying voice that sounds like this all the time. How could I ever sing well?
I think I'm pretty good at carrying a tune, but I know there's plenty of other people who are also amazing singers. So, I will not toot my own horn, at least not today. We'll save that for the birthday stream, where it's 12 hours of me. Test, what was the American War considered Madison's War? And he was president at the time. Look, it's been a really long time since I've thought about Revolutionary War. Mostly, I was much better at Victorian, Edwardian period, and Renaissance time. A lot more of the more British inspired. It's the War of 1812.
Oh, we got this one. Otter chitter. There we go. chitter. Activate.
Bo- 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 bo-
And be like, wait, wait, wait. Atawata, thank you so much for the Atawata. Otter chitter is adorable. Thank you, thank you. I appreciate that. Wado. Atawata. Thank you. And now we talk about illness and death. Throughout her life, Austen suffered from a number of diseases, ranging from whooping cough to an ear infection to rheumatism. Despite denying that she was unwell and making fun of hypochondriacs, she began feeling seriously ill in early 1816 from an illness respectively diagnosed as Addison's disease or perhaps Hodgkin's lymphoma. Other misfortunes struck the family in that year as well, as Henry's bank failed in March, causing his bankruptcy and significant losses to the other siblings, and an uncle's hoped for inheritance turned out to be left entirely to his wife. Henry would turn his back onto the clergy and succeed his brothers James as vicar of Stevenson. Oh, he would turn back to the clergy, not back on the clergy. Stevenson, up in that later's death in 1819. Despite her near constant physical decline, Austen finished Persuasion in August 1816 and began work on a new novel known as Sandon. Fearing for her sister's health, Cassandra and Henry brought her to Winchester to be nearer to her doctor. Good night, Ion. Thank you so much for stopping by. I appreciate it. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your night. Mwah. Mwah. There we go. There we go. May 1817. She died there on July 18th at the age of 41 and was buried in Winchester Cathedral. Her epitaph, written by her brother James, speaks of the extraordinary endowments of her mind, but does not mention her as a publisher or a writer. It was only when Persuasion and Northanger Abbey were published posthumously that her brother Henry contributed to a biological note and publicly revealed his sister's identity for the first time. Regency, England. Unfortunately, we do not have an abundance of information on Jane Austen's life in her own words. Only 161 of the perhaps 3,000 letters she wrote during her lifetime survive. The rest were destroyed by her relatives, especially her sister Cassandra, to whom many of them were addressed. The reality of her acid pen was quite the opposition to the image of a quiet and respectable Jane aunt. The family later wished to portray, for instance, in Henry's 1818 biographical notice for her nephew James's Edward Austen Lays, a memoir of Jane Austen. But by the understanding of what life was like in the late 18th to early 19th century, we can perhaps reconstruct something of how this brilliant young woman in straitened circumstances understood and dealt with her world. Jane's Austen era is usually referred to as the Regency, defined in the period between 1811, when George III was deemed unfit to rule, to 1820, when his son ascended the throne. It is sometimes extended into the reign of George IV's brother William IV, who succeeded him in 1830, but ended definitively with the ascent of Queen Victoria in 1837. As conservative as the time seems to be, with its strict class structures, it was also a time of rapid change, even as the industrialization replaced traditional ways of work with centralized factories, and the enclosure movement pushed farmers off their land in name of more efficient agriculture. The French Revolution, which began in 1789, had succeeded to Napoleon's rule in 1799, and from the 1803 to 1815, Britain led a coalition of other nations to try and depose the French emperor. Two of Austen's brothers saw active naval service in this conflict, and Eliza de Fuldehyde, her cousin's close friend and sister-in-law, had previously been married to a French nobleman who was guillotined during the Reign of Terror. Nor were things quiet at home.
The displaced handiworkers, known as Lullites, smashed the machines that had taken their job, and the political activists known as Chartists pushed sometimes violently for more representative parliament and an end to high grain prices and government corruption. Yet, industrialization, Luddites, and Chartists are nowhere in her work, and the French that is referred to only obliquely. Rather, Austen's world was almost entirely entertained with the domestic sphere, with balls and other social events being almost the sole foyers into the public world. The social class she was born into, the landed gentry, these were people of good family, though technically commoners, and thus below the hereditary nobility, the peers who she inherited seats in the House of Lords on the social scale, a sort of a rural middle class. They were descendants of medieval peasants who had grown prosperous enough that they could hire workers instead of farming with their own hands. Others were descended from minor nobility. By Austen's time, gentry had come to mean those who would earn an income solely throughout rent they charged tenant farmers, or who did not engage in commerce. As nebulous as this might seem, the distinctions were clear in the status-minded British. For instance, many of the gentry were entitled to bear coats of arms, and somewhat after Austen's times, their family began to be recorded in Burke's lands and gentry, the who's of class. The landed gentry declined in the 1870s following an agricultural depression, again after World War I. So basically, as I said, the gentry was upper middle class. They were not nobles themselves, but did well enough that they would be able to attend noble-esque gatherings like balls, and they would put on grand parties, and they would take care of townspeople even though themselves were not large landowners. They would own small plots of land in like maybe a very small town versus being like a count or a duke or a marquis. They would just be very rich people, and their small land would usually rent it out to farmers or tradespeople, usually like a blacksmith or somebody who did a lot of wool work, usually in tandem with the farms that they would rent out. Like somebody might do a lot of sheep farming, and the other person did tactiles, and it would make the land a lot more efficient and able to be used, and they would take the rent from those, and that is how they made their living. Or through artistic pursuits if they were male, generally a well-established painter or no loud noises today. Soothing otter time. Yes, we are reading Pride and Prejudice, and currently right now we are in the prelude of who was Jane Austen, and just kind of giving some, Victorian history, Regency history, how this kind of came to be before reading the actual Pride and Prejudice. Because maybe not everybody is well aware of, the times that she wrote in, or what the class separation is of, British hierarchy. You feel like you're back at uni now? Well, then consider this the otter class. I should put on my glasses, perhaps. You know what? We'll do that. We're putting on the glasses. Give me a moment. Where's my glasses? Where's my glasses? My glasses. I cannot read without my glasses. Where are all my glasses? There's so many. You know what? Let me look. Can I just touch your glasses? There we go. They're my glasses. I found them. Here they are. There you go. Now I'm smart. Wonder how many points you'll get in this course. Enough points to fill your heart. It's an elective. Don't worry. The only participation you need is to listen. Now, I do look like Grandma Otter. I do look like Grandma Otter. I'm reading you a story, dearie, about Jane Austen. And then I'll read you one of her stories, obviously. I look smarter. +5 intelligence. When my score was a 1, that means I went up to 2. I have an int of 3 now. Unless you don't do it by 5 points like D&D. And then it's a 6. I'm smart now. Smart auto. While many were forced to sell their estates, those born into the gentry often became or intermarried with other middling sorts: attorneys, military officers, politicians, and of course the clergy. However, they were distinct from merchants and the new elite of industry who were emerging, though many of the former, having their own grown prosperous, would seek to devise themselves of their businesses, using their profits to buy an estate, send their sons to Oxford and Cambridge, and thus move their families up socially into the gentry. Entering the clergy was another way that a man of good family, particularly a younger son, could earn a living and provide for a wife and family, while avoiding working with his hands, and thus losing his social status. The position of a clergyman was a life that came with benefits, that is, a salary, though there were around 11,500 such posts in England themselves, most, like the one held by Austen's father, not paying very much at all. There was never enough for all the ordained clergy, so some were bestowed by universities, such as Cambridge and Oxford, some belonging to the crown themselves, and about a fifth belonging to the church itself, and over half were controlled by the gentry and nobility. Some of these positions, such as being a rector, the one who received most of the income from the parish, could pay very well, though not necessarily so in the case of Austen's father. Being a vicar or an ordinary clergyman paid less, and a post as curate or assistant could pay very little indeed, only around £50 a year, far below the £300 considered to be the lowest level of the gentry. As the daughter of a clergyman, Austen was familiar with the politics around such positions and the courting of those who controlled them, and indeed the entire subplot around Wickham and the Pride and Prejudice surrounds the controversy over obtaining a prosperous benefits. Sorry, a what? If you're talking about what a benefice is, it's a salary. It's essentially their yearly pay, and depending on what your level with your church and how prosperous that church was, being how many people came, how many people gave money to the crown, to the church. The pay of wild varied. Being a regular vicar, a regular clergyman could pay well if you were in a large area with a very strong parish. Or if you were dedicated to one that was the crown, or dedicated to one for Cambridge or Oxford or a large school. That's what would pay well. But there were higher positions, generally when they were talking about somebody who is controlling the money that's going into all of these churches that do come from the crown or from a school. They are paid more than a regular clergyman, and then just a assistant is not paid at all, really. It's quite literally just like a preacher is not paid much. I've seen me joined by Phoenix Pearl, attorney at law. Other attorney at law. No, it's more of a I am Professor Pearl. I'm Pearl-fessor. I am a teacher today. Actually, I should do like a big history lesson and call it Pearl-fessor time. That'd be fun. But hi, Ariel Ace. Yeah, Victor is basically a priest, but like a priest that's in charge of other preachers. They're the middlemen. While the assistant staff are what we think of preachers nowadays. They are the ones who do all the like side work, while the vicar themselves actually does the active of the sermon and making the speeches and generally connecting with their community, while positions above usually just deal with the other churches, um, sort of a pyramid of who that affects. But as I said before, that the benefits and dowries and stuff is going to be a big part of Pride and Prejudice. Understanding what these are really means that you'll get the core of everything that's going on, because this is going to be very dialogue heavy. It is a lot of man versus man or man versus society in Pride and Prejudice. So a lot of it is done by just dialogue, lots of talking and understanding, what is considered polite conversation when one is being curt in what exactly they're looking over. So what does an otter really look like? A lot of seashells and very pretty rocks. Lots of shiny shit. Just, ooh, it sparkles and shines. I must take it for my hoard. Much the same as you would want to give a dragon just, shiny seashells, pretty rocks, maybe a neat thing to chew on. Personally, maybe some food. I don't know nobody would say no to food. Like well-made food. Fresh sea fish, but that's going in my tummy. Just as Jane Austen did not approve of the Prince Regent, the gentry did not necessarily approve of the nobility's lifestyles. In fact, Jane's brothers, James and Henry, edited a magazine during their college days, The Loiterer, that satirized the indolent upper class. Under the influence of the prince's close family friend, George Bryan, Beau Brummell's, men's fashion in the university, then the military, and in civilian life became more elaborate and expensive than ever. Though Brummell fell out of favor when the Regency era began in 1811, his influence remained. The Prince Regent himself spoke prodigiously, and was estranged from his wife, Princess Caroline, and had numerous affairs, including the invalid marriage to his longtime mistress, the Catholic Mia Fitz Herbert, and ate and drank his way into obesity and then an early grave. The world of the gentry was so much more than circumscribed than that of nobility, or even that those who lived in towns. Travel was difficult before the invention of the railroad. They did not often have the resources to undertake the grand tour of Europe that was so fashionable for young men's means. The knights and Edward had adopted their heir on such a tour, basically meaning that while the highest of nobility would kind of gallop around Europe, drinking, eating, making merriment with the local women across most of Europe. That was kind of, when they would see in the sights and whatnot, and their higher up nobility family came by and essentially were like, okay, we cannot have children, so instead we will take you as our heir, so that when my lord or whoever passes, you become next in line, instead of giving it to like some stranger that they don't really know. They would just extend it to a long down the line family member. And so it was not exactly seemly for Austen to be talking about politics or writing history, specifically, one, because she's a woman, and two, because she's from the gentry versus being of a noble class. It's considering like that she'd be reaching or commenting out of turn. But also, Jane Austen did not give a fuck. Jane Austen's worldview seems rather parochial, because she was forced to concern herself with things deemed proper for a woman of her social status, love, and marriage. So, what does that mean to her? If the idea of romantic love was the consistent theme in Jane Austen's works, it was not disinterested love. Marriage was the sole means of support allowable for a dignified woman of means. As shown by Austen needing her brother to sign her contracts with her publisher, a woman's legal and social standing was not equal to that of a man in Austen's period. Rather, she was considered a minor under the closest male relatively, likely to be passed over for an inheritance and unable to control her own property if she were to have any in the first place. The key to scrutiny, if not freedom of or safety, was obtaining an advantage marriage, upon which a woman was considered a legal minor under her husband.
Hello, hello, Suspicious Lantern. Welcome, welcome. We are doing some reading. We are reading the prelude of Jane Austen before getting into Pride and Prejudice. Currently, we're talking about essentially what is a woman's place. So, historically, women were underneath the closest living male, usually their fathers, but if their fathers have passed, it would then move themselves onto the next oldest sibling that was male. I must peel yourself away. You will sleep through work. All right. Goodbye, Venomous. Goodbye. Thank you for stopping by. And, Umir, please enjoy the lark. Hello, Yui. You're learning things. You're learning things and getting comfy. Come on, guys. Why didn't they think of this as like, ASMR Moses? How to learn through ASMR Moses. You learn by sleeping. Big brain. The otter is comfy. I'm glad the otter is comfy. I'm actually really enjoying reading this because I do like Regency period stuff. I love period pieces. Regency before the Victorian era, right before the Edwardian era. Like, that is my preferred stuff. At least for, social, political stuff. Maybe not necessarily the great wars and whatnot, but understanding the general life of, the people who lived in there, knowing the difference between high nobility, gentry, commoner, peasant, that sort of thing. Also, hello, Kuropos, welcome. We are reading some Jane Austen, currently a prelude, so you'll be hearing some pages flip, maybe some tapping, just soft speaking, soft reading for me. I hope that you'll be able to sit back and enjoy as we, one, learn a little bit about the Regency area, and two, enjoy the work of Jane Austen herself. Also, hello, Sherry Bun. Hey, Elle, if you're still here, sweetheart, could you do me a big favor and shout out Sherry Bun, please? Fellow ASM artist, and honestly, such a sweet bun when I was not doing super great. I appreciate you reaching out. Thank you. Oh, you're welcome. I promise I will never be able to read it properly. Again, probably, because dyslexia hard. Hello, Crunk Lab. Hello. We are reading some Jane Austen. We're going to be reading Pride and Prejudice. You're going to hear some pages flipping because I've got this nice, thick leather book. It gives good taps, honestly. Guys, listen to this. Just... It's so good. I love it. Aw, Sherry Bun, sweetheart. Oh, thank you. But yes, we will be reading, and we were basically just talking about what a woman's place was in the Regency period, and how
that they were unable to own land. They might get a small amount of inheritance, maybe, but that's usually only if one, that they didn't have a son, and then there would be a main inheritance given to the next male kin. So it would be like a cousin or like a second cousin way down the line, and they would just get a small pittance. One of the things is if they owned any houses or any land, that would be given to the next male heir, while a female may only receive a small amount of money. Um, yeah, it's going to be some page ASMR. Yeah. So it would even supersede age. Like if you are a let's go with 25-year-old woman during this time, and your father has passed, it would then be the next of kin, the person in charge of all the money and stuff, would then be your either elder brother, or if you had a younger brother, it would be an uncle or a cousin who held the title until that male became of age. So they would become the next lord of the house, essentially. Um, so it would be like if you had a 14-year-old little boy, he then becomes in charge of you upon his 18th birthday. And that is a little weird. But that's what they mean by, having to secure a good marriage, because you would then be underneath your husband versus being underneath your brother or your father for financial decisions and all that good jazz. Also, hello, Pineapple Apple. Lovely to see you. Hi. We are reading some of this Jane Austen, discussing a little bit of the history surrounding why things are the way they are, and eventually we will be reading Pride and Prejudice. There's going to be some book pages, some tapping, some scratching, and just generally soft reading and explanation for me. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy. We're going to be probably ending sometime around about 10 o'clock CST, because I do have to get to a collab later where we'll be playing Phasmophobia with my half-sister, Mia, and with my big sister, Phoebe. And that's going to be a lot of fun. So we're getting nice and comfy before we meet all the ghosties later. Alright. Even if it had its risks, many women died in childbirth. The other side of the coin was that a young man was unable to marry until he either come into or made his fortune. Thus, the unhappy conclusion of Jane Austen's flirtation with Tom Lefroy. Sex before marriage was, needless to say, out of the question. Such would lead to a pregnancy, and worse, the loss of a family status. This explains why Wickham's seduction in Lydia in Pride and Prejudice was such a disaster for the Bennets. Phoebe! Can I get a shout out for Phoebe, please? Also, hello, Sir Cheaties. Hello, everybody. We are reading some Jane Austen, and we've got here some book tapping, scratching, page turning, and just general reading for me. And a lot of history to explain why things are important and such. And I want you to know, Phoebe is a huge reader. She's a big book nerd, so I'm hoping she doesn't judge me. Please no judgy. I like Pride and Prejudice. Mr. Darcy. And I will be reading during the Pride and Prejudice parts with a bit of an English accent, so I hope nobody minds. Also, these are my glasses to make me look smart. Look, I smart now. Big brain.
Also, thank you, Elle, for that shout out. Such a sweetheart. Also, thank you so much for the Atawata. Fede, thank you. Atawata. Okay.
Yet along with this reality came the idea of sentiment, or emotion. Fashionable novels of the 18th century made much of the unrestrained display of feelings, and their characters' understanding of and reaction to the feelings of other characters. In doing so, readers were themselves educated how to think, how to feel. Thus, as in literature, it was expected of a young lady of a good family would be in love with her beau, as Mr. Bennet insisted his daughters would be. Even Princess Charlotte, daughter of the unpopular Prince Regent, refused to bend to her father's will when choosing a husband. Of course, as heir to the British throne, Princess Charlotte's fortune was not in question. For most people, such sentiment needed to be tempered by a fine understanding of the social realities of class and money. Love and marriage in Jane Austen's time was really a balance between the poles of, well, sense and sensibility. Austen was a reader before she was a writer, and sentimental novels and plays, and her reaction to them were in the DNA of everything she has ever wrote. Equally influential was the dramatic gesture known as the Comedy of Manners, such as Oliver Goldsmith's She Stoops to Conquer. Such plays satirize the mores of contemporary society and tend to revolve around some scandal or some stock characters who engage in witty vaudeville repertoire. They were a means of social commentary and allowed Austen to be able to mock the sense of fashion that was so important to the upper class, though of course the Prince Regent decided that her novels themselves would become fashionable.
Hello, Khan. Hello. We're reading some Jane Austen today. We'll be reading Pride and Prejudice a little bit once we're done with this prelude. We've got just a couple more pages before we get into it. So there's going to be some scratching, some book tapping, and then of course, the periodical or oh, it's okay. General, it's fine. I understand. There's sometimes when people gotta go. But thank you so much for, stopping by. Mwah. Mwah. So there's no need to feel sorry. I'm happy when you're here, and if you gotta go, you gotta go. Also, thank you, Silicon, for the stretchy stretch. There you go. Pop my back. That felt good. Now everybody should roll their head around slowly, and then the other way, slowly. There we go. My neck feels good. It's okay, General. If you do come back, you will. And if you don't, you don't. But I hope that you have a wonderful evening, however. Oh, hello, Raiders. Welcome. My name is Pearl the Otter, and I'm Sea Otter Sea Captain VTuber. And today I'm reading Jane Austen. So please, we're reading the prelude. There's going to be some page turning, some scratching, maybe some tapping, along with various otter noises, generally being, or in between. But welcome everybody. Welcome aboard Emma Kuma and Ryo Foxy to the SS Otterworldly Traveler. Please enjoy your vacation. Thank you so much for the follow. I do appreciate it. Hello, Eric. Hello. Welcome aboard Ghostly Razgriz. The Ghostly Razgriz. I've seen other Razgriz. Are you the ghost of Razgriz past? But anyway, welcome aboard, and please enjoy your vacation. Thank you guys so much for the follow. And can I get a shout out, Elle, if you haven't already, for Mythic Pixel? Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
But right now we are reading the prelude of Jane Austen, just a little bit of a, history and kind of like an understanding of the times during which the Pride and Prejudice essentially resides in. Currently, we're talking about love, marriage, money, and sentiment during the time that, Austen's popularity. Also, thank you so much for hyping 11 months. 11 months a loyal sailor. Thank you. Mwah. And there's the 11-month, 11 kiss stipend. Please enjoy. Thank you so much, hyping. Thank you so much for 11 months. You guys, honestly, every time somebody's just like more than a month that, decides to stay by, it really makes my time. It really makes me feel good because I never expect anybody to stay. So it's so nice to have that, where we come by, their name, and it just makes me all warm and fuzzy. I'm all warm and fuzzy on the outside, but now my outside and my inside match. You're gonna rest a bit? Well, thank you. I hope you enjoy your rest. Mythic Pixel, thank you. There's some kisses. Make sure that, you're protected from any nightmares. Also, welcome aboard Mayor Colossus to the SS Otterworldly Traveler. Please enjoy vacation. Thank you so much for following. I appreciate it. Why wouldn't people stay? Look, you guys think I'm fun. I think I'm just a big dork. I am an 80-year-old lady pretending to be 28. Quite literally, like 28-year-old body, 80-year-old woman on the inside. I'm like, oh, I love a doily and a tea, and I like to read Jane Austen. You love my style? Well, thank you. Mostly it's just vintage, very vintage. But I appreciate it. Thank you. Alright, and back to the prelude that we were reading. The Gothic novel was a particular subgenre of the sentimental novel, featuring gloomy tales of horror set in the ruins of a medieval past. The Castle of Otranto in 1764 by Horace Walpole was a prototype of the genre, and many others, from Mary Shelley's to Bram Stoker. Following throughout the 19th century, gloom, dread, and ruined castles, ancestral curses, and fainting heroines were the staples of the form. Catherine Morland, heroine of Jane Austen's Northanger Abbey, was a fan of Gothic writer Anne Radcliffe, and many of the misunderstandings in the novel derive from the contrast between Catherine's indulging in literary conceits and Austen's more realistic literary world. This is a perfect bedtime story, and I don't know the name of. Currently, we are reading the prelude to Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. So we will be reading it, and it'll be very more English when I actually read into the novel itself. So for right now, we're just kind of reading. I'm just kind of reading the prelude. Also, hello, Pokéloops. Welcome, welcome. How are you doing? We are doing a little bit of a book reading ASMR. We've got some tappy here. We've got some page turning. And we even have soft reading by me. You're playing Dying Light 2. How am I? I'm pretty good. I'm pretty happy that I'm actually getting to read one of these ASMR book nights again. We are reading Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. Currently we're on the prelude, giving a little bit of a history to basically the time set in, and an understanding of what is a gentry, what is a dowry, what is the geopolitical situation going on this time during Pride and Prejudice. And I am a big fan of Regency period, Victorian, Edwardian, a lot of the, classicer literature and Renaissance pieces, of course. I am a big fan of the Bard himself, William Shakespeare. So this just kind of extends my love of of English classic literature. You remember reading it when I was younger? I remember reading it, and I also remember, getting real gay for for the movie version. For me both having to kiss Miss Elizabeth Bennet and also wanting to kiss Mr. Darcy. I was a young Pearl being like, Mummy, could I marry them both? Could I marry them both? They are very attractive individuals. Mummy, please. And she was like, no, you cannot. You can lust over Mr. Darcy, or any of the male suitors, I suppose. Even Mr. Wickham, if you must. But really, you must lust over Elizabeth Bennet. And I was like, yes, Mummy, of course I would. She's a strong-minded individual woman. And have you seen that jawline? And she'd be like, yes, I have seen that jawline. I'm like, Mummy, then you must understand. She goes, no. You can see that another woman is handsome, but you cannot lust over her in such a way, Pearl. And I was like, but Mummy, I wish to marry her. I wish to be Mrs. Bennet. The second Mrs. Bennet. Please. So that became my love affair with period pieces. So Austen was not only influenced by the fashionable genres of her day, she was transformed and reacted to them as well, bringing in her own unique perspective as a woman. Her take on love and marriage was shown by a famous first line of Pride and Prejudice. It's decidedly iconic. It is truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. Without appreciating ways in which such brilliant but perhaps frustrated and disappointed woman mocked both her peers and her betters, we cannot truly understand the work of Jane Austen. Neither can we understand how she paved the way for literary realism that is presenting everyday things truthfully. But Mummy, I think everybody really enjoys just British poil. It's just like, but Mummy, could I please? I'm a very fancy child, don't you know? Are you my Mummy? No, I don't have a gas mask, just goggles, but though I have seen a lot of the Doctor. I have seen quite a lot. My personal favourite is a Mr. Tennant, the 9th and 10th Doctor. You got the reference? Yes, I did. Also, welcome aboard Trash Airlines to the SS Utterly Traveler. Please enjoy your vacation. Thank you so much for the follow. You might be a trash airline, but I promise you this is a premier cruise. Alright. And on to the prelude. The novels. This volume contains all 6 of Austen's complete novels. Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, Mansfield Park, Emma, and posthumously, after Austen's death on July 18th, 1817, Austen also left behind some juvenilia, a short episodally novel, Lady Susan, and 2 incomplete novels, Sedition and The Watsons. Sense and Sensibility hinges on a young woman needing to secure a future. Eleanor Marianne and Margaret Dashwood are left penniless by their father's death and their half-brothers, Prejudice. They are near to their relative Sir John Middleton, and Marianne meets John Willoughby, a handsome young man with excellent prospects. A cousin of Sir John's wife, Lucy Steele, comes to visit and reveals that she keeps another young man, Edward Ferrars, imprisoned in a loveless engagement. Willoughby is revealed to be a seducer of men of low morals. The characters must maneuver their ways through the tangled web of relationships, motivations, and property settlements to find wedded bliss. However, you're currently reading The Willows by Agron Blackwood. It's so good. Well, thank you. I should look into that and see if I would like it. Currently, we will be reading Pride and Prejudice, which is the concerns of the Bennet sisters, especially Elizabeth Bennet, and her relationship with the rich but seemingly aloof and proud Mr. Darcy. Like Willoughby, in the Sense and Sensibility, a thorough scoundrel who represents the amorality and the aristocracy. Mansfield Park is Austen's less well-reviewed novel, but sold very well. Fanny Price, one of 10 children, is sent to live with her uncle's home. There she is raised in the ways of aristocracy and eventually marries her cousin, Edmund Bertram. In keeping with Jane Austen's innocence of rewarding virtue and punishing vice, the mocking of the foibles of the upper classes in the novel is also deals with an affair coming out of Maria Bertram's loveless marriage with a rich but insipid man. Thank you, I'm a boss for the hot water. I appreciate it. I think that's my favorite part of the otter water, is just going otter water and then making silly sounds. But also, hydration is important, especially when reading. Emma, the last of Austen's books to be published during her lifetime, concerns Emma Woodhouse's misguided attempts to play matchmaker to her friends and family. The results are disastrous. Her friend Harriet's heart broken by the social climbing of Mr. Elton. Emma, for her part, makes a number of social missteps. In the end, she marries her neighbor, George Knightley, who is the only one to reproach her for her schemes. The first of Jane Austen novels to be complimented but not only published posthumously, Northanger Abbey, is a commentary on the cult of sentiment in young women's reading. Catherine Morland is, like Austen herself, the daughter of a poor rural clergyman, invited to stay in the titular country home of the Tinleys. She embarrassed when nothing there conforms to the conceits of the Gothic novels, which she is so fond of. A hitch in her love affair with Henry Tinley, of course, when her father, General Tinley, sends her home, believing that the Morlands to be penniless. Meanwhile, Henry's elder brother Frederick seduces and then abandons the boastful and selfish Isabella Thorpe. Also, welcome word, Bixton, to the SS, Unruly Traveler. Please enjoy your vacation. Thank you so much for the follow. I appreciate it. Where would Pearl be without the Atawata? Pearl would be very thirsty. Even much more than she usually is. And trust me, I am parched. Persuasion's heroine, Anne Elliot, at 27, is older and wiser than all of Austen's other protagonists. Anne regrets breaking her engagement to the young naval officer Frederick Wentworth, especially since her family has now fallen into debt and is forced to move to Bath. She manages through an appeal and emotion, rather than by calculation, to reconcile with the now Captain Wentworth, who has grown wealthy from prize money from war. Austen's own title for the work was The Elliots. Henry's named it Persuasion when it was published posthumously. Well received during her lifetime, Jane Austen's works were bought by the publisher Richard Bentley in 1833 and included this in his standard novel series. They have never been out of print since that time. Austen's novels have been repeatedly adapted into films, particularly Pride and Prejudice, which was first produced in 1938. The other adaptations include the modernizations of Northbound, game shows themselves, the Jane Games, and a completely outlandish Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. Her own life has been, besides the subject of considerable academic study, explored in documentaries, TV series, as well as the film Becoming Jane, a fictionalized version of her romance with Tom Lefroy. Her cultural influences, needless to say, have been immense, everything from the monoromantic comedies to the acclaimed series Downton Abbey. Got some milk and cookies to go with the perfect vibe. Another one would be a warm cup of tea, and perhaps, we call those cookies a biscuit, so we can feel ever so much British. But yes, it is a very comfy and cozy choice. Excellent. Which chronicles the declining years of the gentry of whom Austen wrote about, owes a significant dent to her for a woman born into constrained, if relatively privileged circumstances, to have such an influence mark as Jane Austen's enduring genius. Alright, and that was the prelude, and now we move on to me trying to find the first page of Pride and Prejudice, which is on 205. So there's going to be a lot of page sounds. Oh, here we are. Two oh 3, 204, 205. Here we are. Pride and Prejudice. Chapter 1. It is truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. However little is known of the feelings or views of such a man may be on his first entering a neighbourhood. This truth is so well fixed in the minds of the surrounding families that he is considered the rightful property of someone other of their daughters. My dear Miss Bennet, my dear Mr. Bennet, said his lady to him one day, have you heard that the Netherfield Park is let at last? Mr. Bennet replied that he had not. But it is, returned she, for Mrs. Long had just been there, and she told me all about it. Mr. Bennet made no answer. Do you not want to know who has taken it? Cried his wife impatiently. You want to tell me, and I have no objection to hearing it. This was invitation enough. Why, my dear, you must know, Mrs. Long said that the Netherfield had been taken by a young man of a large fortune from the north of England, that he came down Monday with a chaise and four to see the place, and was so delighted with it that he agreed with Mr. Morse immediately, and he is so to take in it possession before the Michaelmas, and some of his servants are to be in the house by the end of next week. What is his name? Bingley. Is he married or single? Oh, single, my dear, to be sure. A single man of a large fortune, 4,000 or 5,000 a year. What a fine thing for our girls. How so? How could it affect them? Well, my dear Mr. Bennet, replied his wife, how can you be so tiresome? You know what I am thinking of marrying is one to one of them. Is that his design in sending it? Design? Nonsense! How can you talk so? But it's so very like that he may fall in love with one of them. Therefore you must visit him as soon as he comes. I see no occasion for that. You and the girls may go, or may send themselves, which perhaps would still be better, for you are as handsome as any of them. Mr. Bingley may like you, may have the best of the party. Oh, my dear, you flatter me. I certainly have had my share of beauty, but I do not pretend to be anything extraordinary now. When a woman has 5 grown-up daughters, she ought to give some thinking to her own beauty. In such cases, a woman is not often much for beauty to think of. But, my dear, you must go and see Mr. Bingley when he comes to the neighbourhood. It's more than I engage for, I assure you. But consider your daughters. Only think of what the establishment would be for one of them. Sir William and Lady Lucas are determined to go, merely on account that, for in general, you know, they visit no newcomers. Indeed, you must go, for it would be impossible for us to visit them if you do not. You are overly scrupulous, Shirley, I dare say. Mr. Bingley will be very glad to see you, and I will send a few lines by you to assure them of my hearty consent to join his marrying whichever he chooses of the girls, though I must throw a good word for my little Lizzie. I desire you do nothing. Lizzie is far not a bit better than the others, and I am not sure she is half so handsome as Jane, nor half so good-humoured as Lydia, but you are always giving her the preference. They have none of them of which to recommend them, he replied. They are all silly and ignorant like other girls, but Lizzie has something more of a quickness in her than her sisters. Mr. Bennet, how can you abuse your own children in such a way? You take delight in vexing me. You have no compassion for my poor nerves. You mistake me, my dear. I have high respect for your nerves. They are my old friends. I have heard you mention them with consideration these last 20 years at least. 20 years, repeated Mr. Bingley. 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 20 years, repeated Mr I love Mr. Bennet. I have to be honest. Mr. Bennet is he's a quick-witted man, and he's very funny. And his wife is just hysterical. Just at all the time. She's just like, oh, how dare you? You are my husband, and you speak to me in such a way. But they truly actually do love and care about each other, and it's a very good vibe. I like their relationship. But you do not know what I suffer. But I hope you will get over it and leave seeing many young men over 4,000 a year come into the neighbourhood. It will be of no use to us for 20 such to come, since you will not visit them. Depend on, my dear, that there were 20, I will visit them all. Mr. Bennet was an odd mixture of quick parts, sarcastic humour, reserve, and caprice, but the experience of 23 years had been insufferable to make his wife understand his character. Her mind, however, was less difficult to develop. She was a woman of means, understanding little information and an uncertain temper. When she was discontented, she fancied herself unnervous. The business of her life was to get her daughter married. Its solstice was visiting and news. Mr. Bennet's wife is this man has nerves of steel. He also gives no fucks. He will tell you exactly how he feels about you, and will be very quick with his wit about it. And I think that's why he dotes on Lizzie such, is that he sees a lot of himself in her, and that's why she's his favorite. He even talks about it, there's a quickness about her. Would I date Mr. Darcy? Personally, yes, I probably would. Granted, I would be much like Elizabeth Bennet, very forward about how my feelings are to his apparent aloofness. And I feel like that I'm not a dull blade. I'm quite a quick wit, I think. Have a fun reading. I am having fun reading. It is one of my favorite things to do. More than that, I find myself rather sharp, perhaps, at least a silvered tongue, and I have been known to make use of it for good or for ill. So I would quite enjoy Mr. Darcy, definitely moreover than Mr. Wickham. Mr. Wickham, who I do not like, and much to, Lizzie's dismay, her cousin is none too good either. Well, your accent currently says sassy mood. Well, you see here, I do have a bit of a sassy air about me, but I can also be more of an understanding and demure lady, of course. Or I could be even more, certainly more like a coalman's wife, like a fish's wife. Also, thank you, Renko, for the atawada. Actually, I'm gonna get a double drink, double gulp, big sippy. There we go. And now, on to chapter 2. Mr. Bennet was among the earliest of those who waited on Mr. Biddingly. He had always intended to visit him, although the last always assuring his wife that he would not go till the evening after the visit was paid, and she had no knowledge of it. It was then disclosed on the following manner, observing his second daughter employed in the trimming of a hat. He suddenly addressed her with, "I hope Mr. Bingley will like it, Lizzie." "We are not to know in which way what Mr. Bingley likes," said her mother resentfully, "since we are not to visit." But you forget, Mamma, said Elizabeth, that we shall meet him at the assemblies, and that Mr. Long had promised to introduce him. I do not believe that Mrs. Long... Okay, wait, which is that? Okay. I do not believe that Mr. Long will do such a thing. She has 2 nieces of her own. She is a selfish, hypocritical woman, and I have no opinion of her. No more than I, said Mr. Bennet, and I am glad to find you do not depend on her serving you. Mrs. Bennet denied not to make a reply, but, unable to contain herself, began scolding one of her daughters. Don't keep coughing so, Kitty, for heaven's sake. Have a little compassion on my nerves. You tear them to pieces. Kitty has no discretion on her coughs, said her father. She simply times them ill. I do not cough for my own amusement, replied Kitty fretfully. When is your next ball to be, Lizzie? Tomorrow night. Tomorrow's fortnight. Aye, so, cried her mother, and Mrs. Long does not come back till the day before, so it will be impossible for her to introduce him, for she will not know him herself. Then, my dear, you have the advantage over your friend, and introduce Miss Bingley to her. Impossible, Miss Bennet, impossible, when I am not acquainted with him myself. How can you be so teasing? I honour your circumspection. A fortnight's acquaintance is certainly very little. One cannot really know when a man by its end of a fortnight, but if we do not venture, somebody else will. And after all, Mr. Long and her daughters must stand their chance, and therefore she will think of it an act of kindness. If you decline the office, I will take on myself. The girl stared at the father. Mrs. Bennet only said, Nonsense! Nonsense! What can be the meaning of that emphatic exclamation? Cried he. Do you not consider the forms of the introduction, stressed a little laid upon them, as nonsense? I cannot quite agree with you there. What you say, Mary, for you are a young lady of deeper reflection. I know and read good books and make extra contracts. Mary wished to say something sensible, but knew not how. While Mary is adjusting her ideas, he continued, let us return to Mr. Bingley. I am sick of Mr. Bingley, cried his wife. I am so sorry to hear of that. But why did you not tell me that before? If I had known much this morning, I certainly would not have called upon him. It is very unlucky, but I might have actually paid the visit. We cannot escape his acquaintance now. Pearl audiobook would be great. Except I have terrible dyslexia, so it would require quite a lot of takes for me to do that. But it would be really fun. I would not say no. I like doing all the different voices. It's like voice acting in the book. The book. Yeah. The astonishment of the ladies was just what he wished that of Mrs. Bennet, perhaps surpassing the rest, though when the first triumph of joy was over, she began to declare that it was what she had expected all the while. How good it was in you, my dear Mr. Bennet! But I knew I should persuade you at last. I was sure you loved your girls too well to neglect such an acquaintance. Well, how pleased I am! It is such a good joke, too, that you should have gone this morning and never said a word about it until now. You like the fact that I used different voices? Thank you. I mean, when Mama and Papa Otter used to read to me when I was very young, you're going to sleep has been very comfy. Okay, boy Kaiba, good night, good night. Please enjoy the rest of your night and sleep tight. Bye. Bye. They used to read to me, and they would, do different voices with their hands. And it would be like, oh, but I am Aslan. And she would be like, hello, I am another character from The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, who I cannot remember at this moment in time, because it has been a very long time since I have I have read over The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. But that would be what it would be like. They would do voices and hand puppets. Hello, Terabytes. Hello, hello. Currently, we're doing some Pride and Prejudice reading. There's, page turning, kind of page skimming, occasional tapping of the leather-bound book, and reading done by me. I'm here reading Pride and Prejudice, currently on chapter 2. Let's see. Currently, Mr. and Mrs. Bennet are talking about the fact that Mr. Bennet has finally made the acquaintance, or called upon, Mr. Bingley, who has moved to the northern house, the northern grand house, and will have all of his servants by the end of the week. He is a very affluent man, to make 4,000 pounds a year, 4 or 5,000 pounds a year. Now, Kitty, you may cough as much as you choose, said Mr. Bennet. As he spoke, he left the room, fatigued from the raptures of his wife. What an excellent father you have, girls, she said when the door was shut. I did not know how you will ever make him amends for his kindness, for me either, for that matter. At our time of life it's not so pleasant, I can tell you, that by making new acquaintances every day. But for your sakes we will do anything, Lydia, my love. Though you are thy youngest, I dare say Mr. Bingley will dance with you by the next ball. Oh, said Lydia stoutly, I am not afraid, for I am the youngest. I am the tallest. The rest of the evening was spent in conjecture how soon he would return Mr. Bennet's visit, and determining when they should ask him to dinner. Chapter 3. Not all that Mrs. Bennet, however, with the assistance of her 5 daughters, could ask on the subject was sufficient to draw from her husband any satisfactory description of Mr. Bingley. They attacked him in various ways, with barefaced questions, ingenious suppositions, and distant surmises, but he eluded the skill of them all, and they were at last obliged to accept the second-hand intelligence of their neighbour, Lady Lucas. I am very sorry if everybody just heard, like, a loud sneeze. I think one of my roommates may have, in fact, that was not me. One of my roommates is apparently dying. We're here just reading. That somebody just sneezed, and just like, and I mean like a cartoon sneeze, like that, you've sprayed pepper just on something and it happened to be their nose kind of level of sneeze. It was so loud. So I'm very sorry, anybody who heard that. I'm sorry. Here's some headpats. I'm sorry. They're being a little loud, little loud. I hope they're okay. Her report was highly favourable. Sir William had delighted with him. He was quite young, wonderfully handsome, and extremely agreeable. And to crown the whole, he meant to be at the next assembly with a large party. Nothing could be more delightful. Fond of dancing was a certain step towards falling in love, and with very lively hopes of Mr. Bingley's heart were to be entertained. If I can but see one of my daughters happily married and settled at Netherfield, said Miss Bennet to her husband, and all the others equally married, I shall have nothing to wish for. In a few days Mr. Bingley returned Mr. Bennet's visit, sat about 10 minutes with him in his library. He had entertained the hopes of being admitted to the sight of the young ladies, of whose beauty he had heard of so much. But when he saw only the father, the ladies were somewhat more fortunate, for they had the advantage of ascertaining from an upper window that he wore a blue cloak and rode a black horse. An invitation to dinner was soon afterwards dispatched, and already had Mrs. Bennet planned the courses that were all to credit to her housekeeping, when an answer arrived which deferred it all. Mr. Bingley was obliged to be in town the following day, and consequently unable to accept the honour of their invitation, etc. Mrs. Bennet was quite disconcerted. She could not imagine what business he could have in town so soon after his arrival after Hertfordshire, and she began to fear that he may be always flying about from one place to another, and never settled at Netherfield as he ought to be. Lady Lucas quieted all her fears a little by starting the idea of his being gone to London only to get a large party for the ball, and a report soon followed that Mr. Bingley was to bring 12 ladies and 7 gentlemen with him to the assembly. The girls grieved over such a number of ladies, but were comforted the day before the ball by hearing that instead of the 12 he brought, only 6 with him came from London, his 5 sisters and a cousin, and when the party entered the assembly room it consisted of only 5 together: Mr. Bingley, his 2 sisters, a husband of the eldest, and another young man. Mr. Bingley was good-looking and gentlemanlike. He had a pleasant countenance and easily unaffected manners. His sisters were fine women, with an air of decided fashion. His brother-in-law, Mr. Hurst, merely looked the gentleman, but his friend Mr. Darcy soon drew the attention of the room with his all-fine, tall person, handsome features, noble mind, and the report of which was the general circulation within 5 minutes after his entrance of his having £10,000 a year. Also, I'm a Stitch. Thank you so much for 5 months. 5 months of Royal Sailor. Thank you, thank you. And an extra one, just because I'm feeling really generous. There we go. There's your kiss stipend. Thank you so much. The gentleman pronounced him to be a fine figure of a man. The ladies declared he was much handsomer than Mr. Bingley, and that he was looked with great admiration for about half the evening, till his manners gave a disgust which turned the tide of his popularity, for he was discovered to be proud, to be above his company, and above being pleased, and not all his large estate in Derbyshire could then save him from having the most forbidding, disagreeable countenance, and being unworthy to be compared with his friend. Mr. Bingley had soon made himself acquainted with all the principal people in the room. He was lively and unreserved, danced every dance, and was angry that the ball closed so early, and talked of giving one himself at Netherfield. Such amiable qualities must speak for themselves. What a contrast between him and his friend Mr. Darcy! Mr. Darcy danced only once with Miss Hurst, and once with Mrs. Bingley, declined being introduced to any other lady, and spent the rest of the evening walking about the room, speaking occasionally to one of his own party. His character was decided. He was the proudest, most disagreeable man in the world, and everyone hoped they would never come there again. Amongst most the violent against him was Mrs. Bennet, whose dislike of his general behaviour was sharpened into particular resentment by having slighted one of his daughters. Elizabeth Bennet had been obliged by the secretary of a gentleman to sit out for 2 dances. During the part of that time, Mr. Darcy had been standing near enough for her to hear a conversation between him and Mr. Bingley, who came from the dance for only a few minutes, to press his friend to join it. "Come, Darcy," said he, "I must have you for the dance. I hate seeing you stand about by yourself in this stupid manner. You had much better dance." "I certainly will not. You know how I detest it. Unless I am particularly acquainted with my partner, at such an assembly as this would be insupportable. Your sisters are engaged, and there is no other woman in the world whom I would not be a punishment to stand up with." "Oh, I would not be so fastidious as you are," cried Mr. Bingley. "For a kingdom! Upon my honour, I've never met so many pleasant girls in my life in this evening, and there are several of them you would see that are uncommonly pretty. You are dancing with the only handsome girl in the room, said Mr. Darcy, looking at the eldest Miss Bennet. Oh, she is the most beautiful creature I've ever beheld. But there's one of her sisters sitting down just behind you, who is also very pretty, and I dare say very agreeable. Do let me ask my partner to introduce you. Which do you mean? And turning around, he looked for a moment at Elizabeth, till, catching her eye, he withdrew his own and coldly said, She is tolerable, but not handsome enough to tempt me. I am no humour at present to give consequence to young ladies who are slighted by other men. You had better return to your partner and enjoy her smiles, for you're wasting your time with mine. Mr. Bing followed his advice. Mr. Darcy walked off, and Elizabeth remained with no very cordial feeling towards him. She said shortly, however, with great spirit among her friends, for she had a lively, playful disposition which delighted in anything ridiculous. Uncommonly beautiful. A compliment to some, an insult to everyone else. Look, there's only one way. You'd be like, she is tolerable. Sir, have you not seen Keira Knightley? How are you to tell me that she's just tolerable? I would like to tolerate her existence all over mine. She is beautiful. Also, IDK, thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you, thank you. There is your first kiss for this kiss stipend. And every month that you remain subscribed, you get more kisses. Every month. Until, the number gets ridiculous. Pearla's a very good reader. That's funny, because I have dyslexia. So it means actually reading's really hard for me. I'll be very honest. I'm very happy that people enjoy my reading, mostly because what is going on outside? They're moving things and sneezing, such loud noises. How unbecoming. I am reading. Much reading. You're not sure if it's lewd or not, but it sounded bad. No, he just showing some support. But it makes me happy, because I don't actually read well. I usually have to take quite a few minutes to read a paragraph, or to make sure that I pronounce a word at least semi-coherently. But it's nice, to be told that I have good reading to people. I always enjoyed, popcorn reading in school, where they would call on you and be like, oh, here's your passage. And I always wanted the ones with dialogue where I could be the character and be like, oh yes, I am the noble prince, and I have come here to rescue fair maiden. And do my own sound effects. That was my favorite part. Everybody else was just like, why are you being so extra? And I'm like, why are you not? Come on, guys, it's boring as fuck if you don't do it. Put some oomph in there. Come on, we're all bored. But yes, I absolutely loved reading like this. The evening altogether passed off pleasantly to the whole family. Mrs. Bennet had seen her eldest daughter much admired by the Netherfield party. Mr. Bingley had danced with her twice, and she had been distinguished by his sisters. Jane was much gratified by this, as her mother could be, though in a quieter way. Elizabeth felt Jane's pleasure. Mary had heard herself mention that Mrs. Bingley was now the most accomplished girl in the neighbourhood, and Catherine and Lydia had been most fortunate enough to never be without her partners, which was all they had yet to learn to care for at a ball. They returned, therefore, in good spirits to Longbourn, the village where they lived, and of which they were the principal inhabitants. They found Mr. Bennet still up with a book. He was regardless of time, and on the present occasion he had a good deal of curiosity as to the events of the evening, which had raised such splendid expectations. He had rather hoped that his wife's views on the stranger would be disappointed, but he soon found out that he had a different story to hear. "Oh my, Mr. Dear Bennet," she entered the room. "We had the most delightful evening and the most excellent ball. I wish we had been there. Jane was so admired. Nothing could be like it. Everybody said how well she looked, and Mr. Bingley thought her quite beautiful and danced with her twice. Only to think that, my dear, he actually danced with her twice. And she was the only creature in the room that he had asked her for a second time. First of all, he asked Miss Lucas, and I was so vexed to see him standing up with her. But, however, he did not admire her at all. Indeed, nobody can. You know, he seemed quite struck with Jane. As he was going down to dance, he so inquired who she was, and got introduced, and asked for the next two. And then the third, he danced with Mrs. King, and then the fourth, Maria Lucas, and the fifth with Jane again, and then the sixth with Lizzie, and the ball ending. If he had any compassion for me," cried her husband impatiently, "he would have not danced with half so much, for God's sake. Say no more of his partners, or that he sprained his ankle in the first dance." "Oh, my dear, I'm quite delighted with him. He's so excessively handsome." Yeah, that was quite literally Pearl in genetic and passionate dialogue. Next classmate. Yeah, so the guy said this, and the guy said that. You love popcorn reading because little shit. I would force the kids who did not want to for my own amusement. I'd be like, "Who do I have a problem with? Congratulations, I'm giving you this next paragraph. Popcorn read, blah, blah, blah. Get fucked." Welcome aboard, Toby, to the SS Autobelly Traveler. Please enjoy your vacation. Thank you so much for the follow. I appreciate it. There is. Darcy is for I don't see. I do not dare see the point of not taking multiple lives. His name is Mr. Darcy. Guys, it was a really good pun, but only for people who knew the book. Also, thank you, Q Wilder, for the Atawata. Mayor Colossus, thank you so much for 6 months. 6 months in advance. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we got 6 months. So that means I gotta do 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5, and then 6. Okay, here we go. And there's all the kisses. Holy shit. 6 months in advance. Okay, Mayor Colossus, you were just like, all right, I have known this otter for like 10 minutes, and I have decided I like it. You just quite literally like took the, the like Thord, I would like another. And just broke the cup. 6 months of story time. You will definitely finish the book. But there will be other things in between. But thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I really do. Alright, let's see what we got here. Oh, my dear, I'm quite delighted with him. He's so excessively handsome, and his sisters are charming women. I've never in my life saw anything more elegant than her dresses. I dare say lace upon Mrs. Hurst's gown. Here she was interrupted again. Mr. Bennet protested against any description of such finery. She was therefore obliged to seek another branch of the subject, and related with much bitterness of spirit and some exaggeration the shocking rudeness of Mr. Darcy. But I can assure you, she added, that Lizzie does not lose so much as not suiting his fancy, for he's the most disagreeable, horrid man. Not at all worth pleasing, so high and so conceited that there was no enduring him. He walked here, he walked there, fancied himself so very great, not handsome enough to even dance with. I wish you had been there, my dear, to have given him one of your set-downs. I quite detest the man. Chapter 4. When Jane and Elizabeth were alone, with the former, who had been cautious in her praise of Mr. Bingley before, expressing to her sister how very much she admired him. He's just what every young man ought to be, she said. Sensible, good-humoured, lively. I never even saw such handy manners. So much ease with such a perfectly good breeding. He is so very handsome, replied Elizabeth. Which a young man ought to likewise be, if he possibly can. His character thereby is complete. I was very much flattered by him asking me to dance a second time. I did not expect such a compliment. Did you not? I did for you, but that's one great difference between us. Compliments always take you by surprise. Me, never. What could be more natural than by him is asking you again? He could not help seeing that you were about 5 times as pretty as every other one in the room. No thanks to his gallantry for that. Well, he is certainly very agreeable, and I give that you to like him. You have liked many stupid a person. Dear Lizzie, you are a great deal too apt. You know how I like people in general, but you never see fault in anybody. All the world are good and agreeable in your eyes, and I never heard you speak ill of a human being in your life. I do not wish to be so hasty in censoring anyone, but I always speak what I think. I know you do, and that's what makes you a wonder, with your good sense to be so honestly blind to the follies and nonsenses of others. Affection of candour is common enough. One meets it with it everywhere, but you seem to be candid without ostentation or design to take the good of anybody's character and make it still better. And say nothing of the bad belongs to you alone. And so like this man's sisters, too, do you? Their manners are not quite equal to his. Certainly not, at first. They were very pleasing women when you converse with them. Mrs. Bingley is to live with her brother, and to keep his house, and I'm much mistaken if we should not find a very charming neighbour in her. You now become story time with Bro became a thing. I hope to do so. I read Alice in Wonderland previously. It's just been kind of a hard time in feeling up to read during how like busy stuff is, and I may go back to trying doing it like once a month. It would be very fun. Can you read with One-chan for a bit? I mean, I can, but it's going to be rather hard during the parts where I'm reading the dialogue. So I suppose I will read normally like this, except for the actual character speaking for a few minutes. You know what's good for your health? It was just more or less getting busy, and when I did ASMR, it became kind of like, okay, what can I do on the fly? And just like get a bunch of stuff out and be like, all right, guys, you tell me what to do, and I'll figure it out. But I would like to actually get back to doing this. You like Pearl's ASMR streams? Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I like them too. Well, technically, I like all of my streams. I have fun. There's plenty of public domain options for reading. It's true. I have the complete work of Sherlock Holmes there, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who has been pushed back because he decided to bunk me not only once but twice during ASMR streams. This is why Jane Austen got first. See? Behave, and I will read you. You don't see this, but I'm giving it the side eye. Aw, well, thank you. I am very pretty. I'm very cute. Mama did a good job of drawing me. Prestige this comes to you in the terms of otter captains. How many other otter captains you know? I think I'm the only one. So, I guess I can concur with the opinion that it is the comfiest otter captain stream. That does automatically make it the best if it's the only one. Big brain. So I'm special. I'm special. Okay. Alright, let's see. Elizabeth listened in silence, but was not convinced that their behavior at the assembly had not been calculated to please in general, and with more quickness of observation and less pliancy of temper than her sister, and with a judgment too unassailed by any less attention to herself, she was very little disposed to approve of them. They were in fact very fine ladies, not deficient in good humour when they were pleased, nor in the power of making themselves agreeable when they chose it, but proud and conceited. They were rather handsome, had been educated in one of the finest private seminaries in town, and had a fortune of 20,000 pounds. Were in the habit of spending more than they ought, and of associating with people of rank, and were therefore in every respect entitled to think well of themselves, and meanly of others. They were of a respectable family in the north of England, a circumstance more deeply impressed by their memories than that of their brother's fortune, and their own had been acquired by a trade. Mr. Bingley inherited property to the amount of nearly 100,000 pounds from his father, who had intended to purchase his estate, but he did not live to do so. Mr. Bingley intended it likewise, and sometimes made the choice of his country, but as he is now provided with a good house and the liberty of a manor, it was doubtful to many of those he knew best the easiness of his temper, whether he might not spend the remainder of his days in Netherfield, and leave it to the next generation to purchase. His sisters were anxious for having an estate of his own, but though he was not only established as a tenant, Mrs. Bingley was by no means unwilling to preside at his table, nor was Mrs. Hurst, who had married a man of more fashionable than fortune, less disposed to consider his house her home when it suited her. Mr. Bingley had not been of age 2 years when he was tempted by an accidental recommendation to look at Netherfield House. He did look at it, and into it for half an hour, which was pleased with the situation and the principal rooms, satisfied with what the owner said in its praise, and took it immediately. Between him and Darcy there was a very steady friendship. In spite of great opposition of character, Bingley has endeared to Darcy by the easiness, openness, and dulcity of his temper, though no disposition could be offered greater contrast to his own. And though he never appeared dissatisfied on the strength of Darcy's, in understanding Darcy was the superior, Bingley was by no means deficient, but Darcy was clever. He was at the same time haughty, reserved, and fastidious, and his manners, well bred, were not inviting. In that respect his friend had greatly the advantage. Bingley was sure of being liked wherever he appeared. Darcy was continually giving offence. The manner of which they spoke of the Merton assembly was significantly characteristic. Bingley had never met with more pleasant people or prettier girls in his lifetime. Everybody had been most kind and attentive to him. There had been no formality, no stiffness. He had soon felt acquainted with all in the room, and as to Miss Bennet, he could not conceive of an angel more beautiful. Darcy, on the contrary, had seen a collection of people whom there was little beauty, no fashion, for none whom he had felt the smallest interest, and from none received attention or pleasure. Miss Bennet he acknowledged to be pretty, but she smiled too much. Mrs. Hurst and her sister allowed to be so, but still they admired her and liked her, and pronounced her to be a sweet girl, and one whom they would not object to know more of. Mrs. Bennet was therefore established as a sweet girl, and to their brother felt authorized by such accommodation to think of her as close. Chapter 5. Within a short walk of Longbourn lived a family of whom the Bennets were particularly intimate. Sir William Lucas had been formerly in trade in Merton, where he had been made a tolerable fortune, and risen to the honour of a knighthood by address to the king. During his mayoralty, the distinction had perhaps been felt too strongly. It had given him a disgust to his business, and his residence a small market town. In quitting them both, he had removed with his family to a house about a mile from Merton, denominated from that period Lucas Lodge, where he could think of pleasures of his own importance, and unshackled by business, occupy himself solely with being civil to all the world. For though established by his rank, it did not render him supercilious. On the contrary, he was all attention to everybody. By nature, inoffensive, friendly, and obliging, his presentation at St. James had made him all the more courteous. Lady Lucas was to be a very good and kind sort of woman, not too clever to be vulnerable neighbor to Miss Bennet. They had several children. The eldest of them, a sensible, intelligent young woman about 27, was Elizabeth's intimate friend. That Miss Lucas and Mrs. Bennet should meet to talk over the ball was absolutely necessary, and in the morning after the assembly brought the former to Longbourn to hear them to communicate. "You began the evening well, Charlotte." Oh, this is Miss Bennet. "Oh, you began the evening well, Charlotte," said Mrs. Bennet with all the self-command that Mrs. Lucas. "You were Mr. Bingley's first choice." "Yes, but you seem to like the second better." "Oh, he must mean Jane, I suppose, because he danced with her twice. To be sure that he did seem if he admired her. Indeed, I rather believe he did. I heard something about it, but I hardly know what. Something about Mr. Robinson." "Perhaps you mean what I had overheard between them and Mr. Robinson. I didn't mention it to you. Mr. Robinson was asked him how he liked the Merton assemblies, and whether he did not think there were a great many pretty women in the room, and which he thought the prettiest, and his answer immediately to the last question, 'Oh, the eldest Miss Bennet, without doubt. There can be no two opinions on that point.'" "Upon my word! Well, this is decided indeed. That doesn't seem as if, but however, it may come to nothing, you know." "My overhearings were more to the purpose of yours, Eliza," said Charlotte. "Mr. Darcy is not so well worth listening to as his friend, is he? Oh, poor Eliza, to be only just tolerable." "I beg you will not put into Lizzie's head to be vexed by the ill temperament that he is such a greasome old man. It would be quite a misfortune to be even liked by him. Mrs. Long told me last night that he sat close to her for half an hour without once opening his lips." "Are you quite sure, ma'am? This is not a little mistake," said Jane. "I certainly saw Mr. Darcy speaking to her." "Aye, because she had asked him at last how he liked Netherford, and he could not help but answering her. But she said that he seemed quite angry when he spoke to." "Mrs. Bingley told me," said Jane, "that he never speaks much, unless to his immediate acquaintances, and with them he was remarkably agreeable." "Oh, I have a great voice for reading the book. Well, thank you. Thank you, thank you. I think it's rather fun. I like doing British literature because I can do a very convincing, almost sort of posh British accent. It's something I've quite made a good attempt at during my time in the Renaissance festivals. So it's something I can easily flip into. Or perhaps something a little bit more. Read me more, Mummy. Oh, Mummy, could you read me more? Could you read me more, please? I need to know how the story ends. All right, well, I'll continue reading for you, just for you, only because you asked so nicely. I did not believe a word of it, my dear. If he had been so very agreeable, he would have talked with Mrs. Long. But I guess now how it was. Everybody said he'd eat up with the pride. I dare he say that he had heard somewhere that Mrs. Long does not keep up with a carriage, and had come to the ball in a hack chaise. "I don't mind his not talking to Mrs. Long," said Miss Lucas, "but I wish he had danced with Eliza." Another time, Lizzie, said to her mother. I would not dance with him if I were you. I believe, ma'am, that I most safely promised to never dance with him. His pride, said Miss Lucas, does not offend me so much as pride often does, but there is an excuse for it. One cannot wonder why such a very fine young man with a family fortune, everything in his favour, should think so highly of himself. If I may so express it, he has a right to be proud.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the stretchy stretch. I appreciate it.
There we go. All right. I have stretched quite finely. So, oh, neck pop. Neck pop. Back on to the pages. That is very true, replied Elizabeth, and I could easily forgive him for his pride, if he had not mortified mine. Pride, observed Mary, who piqued herself on the solidarity of her reflection, is a very common failing, I believe. By all that is ever read, I am convinced that it is very common indeed, but human nature is particularly prone to it, and that there are very few of us who do not cherish the feelings of self-complacency on the score of some quality or other, real or imaginary. Vanity and pride are very different things, though. The words are often used synonymously. A person may be proud without being vain. Pride relates to more of our opinions of ourselves, while vanity to what we would have done with others who think of us.
Artifact, artifact, here comes an artifact, artifact, artifact. I hope that you like it. So, some of you might know, but some of you may not know, that sea otters have to eat at least 25% of its body weight per day just to stay alive. So generally, they weigh somewhere about 75 pounds, an otter, roughly. That means that that's 75 1/4 burgers. That is 75 quarter pounders a day. Artifact, artifact, that is your artifact, artifact, artifact. I hope you like it. Also, I want 75 quarter pounders from McDonald's. How do you eat so much? I'm hungry. Well, think about this. A sea otter is constantly swimming or floating. It doesn't really go to land. Also, they live in cold water, right? So, to keep themselves at proper body temperature, to keep themselves moving and afloat, and, when you rest, you still the otter who broke the internet. Wait, I broke it? We all died once a while back. Oof. I hope people are okay. It's not my fault. I tripped over the cable.
I'm too powerful. I broke everything. Watch out, plus internet to equal oopie.
Okay, what was the last sentence everybody got?
What was the last one? I can't remember. I can't remember what it was.
Yes, you're being numbed. Alright, time for water. Okay. Hello, kind mango. Hello, hello. Well, since it stopped,
When a joke becomes a dad joke, when it becomes a parent.
yes, I like that joke. It's the father of all dad jokes.
Alright. So I'll just read back to the top of the page. That's very true, replied Elizabeth, and I could easily forgive his pride if it had not mortified mine. Pride, observed Mary, who piqued herself upon the solitude of her reflection, is a very common failing, I believe. By all that I've ever read, I'm convinced that it's very common indeed, that human nature is particularly prone to it, and there are very few of us who do not cherish a feeling of self-complacency on the score of some quality or other, real or imaginary. Vanity and pride are very different things, though altogether the words are used often synonymously, and a person may be proud without being vain. As pride relates more to our opinion of ourselves, while vanity is what we would of other things of us. If I were as rich as Mr. Darcy, cried young Lucas, who came with his sisters, I should not care how proud I was. I would keep a pack of foxhounds and drink a bottle of wine a day. Then we would drink a great deal more than you ought, said Mrs. Bennet, and if I were to see you, I shall take away your bottle directly. The boy protested that she should not. She should continue to declare that she would, and the argument ended only with the visit. I've been enjoying this time, and yes, I've been understanding the story. You've been understanding the comfy, but you've not been understanding what's going on. So, essentially, the better way to describe it is that the first chapter was quite literally the excitement that Mr. Bingley has come to town, and that Mrs. Bennet very much wants to marry this very rich man who has purchased this great house to one of her daughters, because of course she would like to make a very good match for her family. Also, hello, caveman. Unga bunga. So with this, they go to a assembly, which is quite literally like a town ball, where they go and they dance and people mingle and stuff. It's kind of like a mixer. There's usually drinking, dancing, people playing musical instruments, girls taking turns on the harpsichord, or, in a big hall where they look at maybe some art or something and chit-chatting. And there's usually one big room where all the girls are dancing. So this is way back when, what you think of as a dancing card. There was actually a card that was made of paper, nice paper, that would be tied to a female's wrist, would be tied to a girl's wrist, and men would come in and sign their names onto the dancing card, promising that they would dance with that girl for this dance or this next dance. And that's where dancing card, by the way, comes from. And so Mr. Bingley, this very nice, well-off gentleman, brings his two sisters um, his sister's like fiance or husband, somebody's related um, to her, and his friend Mr. Darcy, and a cousin is who he brings to the party. And Mr. Bingley dances with Jane Bennet, the eldest Bennet sister. You've never heard of it? You've never heard of a dance card before? Yeah, no, it's down here in the South. We say, can I get a name on your card? And it's reference to that. It was very popular during the Regency to like early Victorian period. Um, it kind of stopped after the Roaring Twenties sort of situation that kind of came out of fashion where they stopped carrying around like a card when they went to party places, usually because they were secret. Because they would have booze and stuff since the prohibition happened, then like speakeasies and stuff where you would normally do like the jazz dancing and the Charleston and whatnot. It would just be it would be more secretive, so there'd be no reason to really carry a dance card because that was more of a like policing society, like putting constraints on stuff and making everything very like proper. And if you're in a fucking speakeasy, you're already like being super legal, like drinking down booze that you don't give a fuck. So just throw that card right out. Fuck that card. It's awful. Who wants it? Nobody. And you just did what you want. But because Mr. Bingley, this nice, handsome, rich man, asked Jane to dance twice, it's normal for you to go and ask a girl, maybe once to dance, kind of like to meet her. Basically to be kind of low-key introduced, and to be kind if you're new to a place. But to ask her twice means you are interested, means that you like her, means you would like to know more. And so that's why it's such a big deal that he danced with Jane twice. And that Mrs. Bingley is bragging to her friend, Miss Lucas, that, oh, Jane has caught the eye of Mr. Bingley, who makes £4,000 a year. Can you believe it, darling? And Mrs. Lucas is like, yes, thank you for humble bragging. But did you hear that Mr. Darcy, the friend that Mr. Bingley brought, had snubbed your other daughter, though. She was letting her know, being like, they were talking, they were sitting, and he said she was tolerable. She was trying to be kind and talk to Mr. Darcy, but he didn't so much as open his mouth. Snubbed. Quite literally, it means that he did not wish to engage with her or pretty much any woman at the party at all, other than being prompted by Mr. Bingley asking, telling him, well, the girl behind you, Jane's sister, is very pretty, and him turning around and only calling her tolerable is snubbing or kind of an insult. Yeah, it's kind of an insult. Him finding himself so much better than her and everybody kind of around him other than Mr. Bingley and Mr. Bingley's two sisters and his cousin. Everybody else is not up to snuff for him because he's a well-endowed man of an incredible fortune of over £10,000. Yeah, so he doesn't want to talk to any of the girls because they're not pretty enough. It's not necessarily that, because they're women. They don't meet his standards. And so, Elizabeth has pretty much told her mother, because her mother is very upset hearing this, how dare he insult my Lizzie. She's very bright. Elizabeth says, well, Mother, you don't have to worry about it, because I dislike him. I would be able to, forgive him if he had not been such an asshole and hurt my pride. You've definitely talked to Pro there. Nice glasses. Oh, no. Now, see, I would not be well enough, as I would have an uncouth mouth, and who is a lady who cannot help herself but be in hysterics about her opinion, and I would tell him that he rightly fuck off. Because I am not a lady who just throws around obscenities. I enunciate them like a fucking lady. It's not really hatred. It's just more of a, he was rude, and so she's mad that he was rude. So it's not really hatred. It's more of just kind of like a spat. But you see, there is always more to the story and more to these characters than just their initial meeting. Okay, whole couple mechanics. Oh, that's true. We did see that in Mr. and Mrs. Bennet. Oh, thank you so much for the stretchy stretch, Ion. I appreciate it. Stretch to the left. Stretch to the right. And down. Good stretch. Also, make sure to stretch your wrists by taking your hand and placing it kind of out forward, like you're about to do some Zen palm force shit, and then take your other hand and place it on to the front of your fingers and pull back ever so slightly, stopping when it hurts, and then letting go. And then you do it to the other hand in the same fashion. Doing it hold, 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 and release. And now doing it upside down. Now facing the opposite side of your hand and pulling in with your hand downwards. There we go. And now the other hand in the same way. So put your hand down, having your palm facing you, and pull your fingers in. There we go. Yeah. Funny enough, I took Taekwondo for about a year. So I know because artists stretch that way with their hands, because it stretches the wrists and all the fingers and stuff. But I did initially see other people in Taekwondo doing that, and I was like, I could do that stretch. I know what that is. I could do it, the thing. Oh my god, I'm inspired. What? Amazing. I'm just cry a little. Hi, Weishi. I'm glad you're comfy. We are going to be reading Chapter 6. Chapter 6. See you later. Thank you. Thank you. Bye, Ion. Mwah. Mwah. There you go. I hope that you have a nice night and sleep well if you're going to bed. Thank you, best otter girl. Note, only otter girl I know. Well, I hope you don't know another otter girl. This will get a little awkward. Okay. The ladies of Longbourn soon waited on those of Netherfield. The visit was soon returned in due form. Mrs. Bennet's pleasing manner grew on the goodwill of Mrs. Hurst and Mrs. Bingley, and though their mother was found to be intolerable, and the younger sisters not worth speaking to, a wish of being better acquainted with them was expressed towards the two eldest. By Jane, this attention was received with the greatest pleasure, but Elizabeth still saw superciliousness in their treatment of everybody else, hardly excepting even her sister, and could not like them, though their kindness to Jane, such as it was, had a value and arising in all probability from the influence of their brother's admiration. It was generally evident, whether they met, that he did admire her, and to her it was equally evident that Jane was yielding to the preference which she had begun to entertain for him from the first, and it was in a way very much to be in love. She considered it with pleasure that it was not likely to be discoverable by the world in general, since Jane united with a great strength of feeling, a composure-ridden temper of a uniform of cheerfulness, of matter which could not be on guard from the superstitious of the impertinent. She mentioned this to her friend, Mrs. Lucas.
Oh, thank you so much, Penguin, for 4 months. 4 months. And hello, fat boy. Hi, hi. Lovely to see you. We are doing some reading today for Pride and Prejudice. Time to eat cold chicken fries. Okay, cold fries are sometimes good, especially if you have like a spicy dipping sauce. So like the heat comes from the dip, not necessarily from the fry. Bring. And currently we are on chapter 6. So essentially what this entire section was talking about is that Jane feels like the two sisters of Mr. Bingley, they are pleasant girls. She thinks they're, as long as they're happy, they're not awful. However, Elizabeth is suspicious of their treatment of Jane, noticing that basically they treat everybody else kind of like they're below them or kind of like they're shit. Wait, so what book is this? It's Pride and Prejudice, done by Jane Austen. It is a Regency period piece. Mostly about the inner circle of, a family known as the Bennets and stuff that happens to them when Mr. Bingley comes and moves into their town, bringing along his friend, Mr. Darcy. Welcome aboard, a sweet bunny gal, to the SS Auto-Relay Traveler. Please enjoy vacation. Thank you so much for the follow. I appreciate it. Saw my emote in another chat, so you thought you'd come by and say hi. Also call me Bunny. Okay, Bunny. Thank you so much for stopping by. I hope that you like the emotes. I think the follower ones are all ones I drew myself. Actually, I think they are. Yep, all of the ones that are follower emotes, I drew those. All the other ones, though, were done by Junie Bunny. Currently, we are reading Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. It is a Regency period piece. It is social commentary on basically about the upper class and the gentry, which is kind of like a middle class, where they're affluent enough to own land, usually shelling it out to farmers and stuff. Also, thank you, Bunny. I'm gonna get a little bit of that atawata. But it is ASMR rating. We've got some pages being turned, occasional this, like tapping, and just generally me reading. And we are on chapter 6, talking about Mrs. Bennet and how Jane and Lizzie feel about Mr. Bingley's sisters. That they find that Jane thinks they're okay. That so long as they're, happy, they're not awful. However, Elizabeth finds them suspect, and that they treat everybody like shit, and the only reason that they're nice to Jane and herself is because Mr. Bingley has feelings for Jane. And that Jane is usually a very pleasant girl to everybody. So while it is very obvious that he likes Jane, not everybody understands that Jane likes him back. Only Elizabeth is privy to that information, being her sister and being so close. So she is very smug in knowing that it is mutual, and that even if he doesn't pick her, that just Jane's general kind demeanor and very forwardly compassionate to her fellow man will not
make it seem like he has slighted her in any real way. She will not have any embarrassment due to it. Mm-hmm. Which is, again, a lot of like social crap, basically. That so as a woman, you're supposed to try and, show the man that you're interested, but not so interested that you seem over eager, and you don't want anybody to like to judge you. It's like you're supposed to get him interested. That's the whole point. But you don't want people talking shit about you and like about the relationship and like calling you a hussy and like all sorts of things. And this sort of like treatment of it, going through the proper channels and like meeting the sisters and the potential like person that you would like to date, just kind of hanging out and doing all that, is to avoid anything that would be unscrupulous, basically anything that would be considered ill-bred. And they're talking about this with Mrs. Lucas. "It may be perhaps pleasant," replied Charlotte, "to be able to impose on the public in such a case, but it's sometimes a disadvantage to do so. Be so very guarded. If a woman conceals her affection with the same skill from the object of it, she may lose the opportunity of fixing him. And it will be but poor consolation to believe that the world equally in its dark. There is so much more for gratitude or vanity in almost every attachment that it is not safe to leave any to itself. We can all begin freely. A slight preference is natural enough, but there are very few of us who have the heart enough to really be in love without encouragement. In 9 cases out of 10, a woman had better show more affection than she feels. Bingley likes your sister, undoubtedly, but he may never do more than like her if she does not help him along." You covered nearly the whole body in blankets. Ah, thank you. Thank you. Down with the gentry. I don't know. It's like the middle class. It's really more of like down with the actual nobility, down with the noble houses. The gentry is just more of like people right underneath them, well enough to hold land, but not necessarily a peasant. To be more of like somebody who is lended out land or is quite marketable for a highly skilled labourer, such as an artist or something like that. But so this is what I was talking about. Charlotte, or Mrs. Lucas, is talking about how a woman has to kind of help him along, showing her affection, but like not too much, because if you do it too much, you're a hussy. But if you do it just enough to let him know that you're interested, without it being like too forward and then considered unscrupulous. The gentry do have such weird sexual codes. You think the gentry's weird? Go to the noble houses. Go to like a count or something. Then it gets crazier. And then it's like, oh no, we cannot date this, nice woman of the gentry. That would be considered going down. So instead, I'll date my cousin and have a child with like weird genetic problems. I want you to know that I had written a paper, quite literally, about the genetic disposition of noble royals due to incest. That was an actual paper I wrote. The bloodline must be kept pure. Yeah, incest was not best. Do not put your cousin to a test. Am I actually an otter? I mean, I'm an otter right here. So doesn't that matter? Kissing cousins, brother, Nemo. Hey. I didn't say that the southern people couldn't do it. I just said that the British people should not do it. It's fine. Look, people in the South already get in trouble for this joke. Might as well go full hog on it, right? Here's the thing. about being from the South. Everybody already think you dating your cousin anyway. So you know what? It's funny. You see how it is? Well, wait, you trying to tell me you British? Nah, you is Australian. You not British. You hate them bitches. Queen Victoria's family was really into that. Yes, they were. Are you trying to only say that you're British when it counts? When you are offended, ex-British still counts? Bitch, that's literally the rest of the world. I'm sorry, Weishi. Being ex-British makes nobody special. We're all ex-British. It's almost like they took over most of the world, being like, bitch, my land now. It's a club that involves everybody, except for maybe like Russia. Like, they even had part of China. They were like, we would like to ceremoniously give this back to you. There you go. Wait, she's so... I love it. I love that I'm too logical right now. But she's just like, I don't have a counter argument. Fuck. Shut up. How dare you be right and understand history and how that shit works? How dare you be intelligent? I hate this. Go back to being stupid and horny. I can win arguments that way. Okay. Alright. You need a pout emote. I'll get on that. I'll put that on the to emote list. Welcome, Evening Master. Hello. You've arrived to sass as the proper people told. Yeah, I'm sass and Weishi. It's fine. Hello. Hi. We're reading Pride and Prejudice and got some book page turning noises. Some are like tappy taps, page scritches, and of course reading done by me. And some like explaining the history and like the social status of stuff. Sweet, you love a good zombie story. You know, this was the original. There are no zombies in it. Only the social pariah kind, maybe, perhaps. Though I do appreciate a good joke. So thank you, Evening Master. Though I not to be certain of the degree of home regard, nor of its reasonableness. She has known him only a fortnight. She has danced 4 dances with him, Sir Merton. She has softened this morning on his own house, and has since dined with him the company 4 times. This is not quite enough to make her understand his character. Did stream die or just me? Why is things dying? Question. Oof. Hello. You know what? I will reread this paragraph again and see if it's okay. I think it's either Twitch or your ISP. Maybe. But I'll reread this over again. But she does help him on, as much as her nature will allow. If I can perceive her regard for him, he mustn't be a simpleton, indeed, not to discover it so. Remember, Eliza, that he does not know Jane's disposition as you do, but if a woman is partial to a man, he does not endeavour to conceal it, he must find it out. Perhaps he must, if he sees her enough, though, Bingley and Jay have met terribly often. It's never for many more than hours together, and they always see each other mixed parties, very large. It is impossible that every moment should be employed in conversing together. Jane should therefore make the most of every half hour in which she commands his attention. When she is too secure of him, there will be more time for leisure or falling in love as much as she chooses. Your plan is a good one, replied Elizabeth, with nothing in question but the desire of being well married. And if I were determined to get a rich husband, or any husband, I dare say I should adopt it. But these are not Jane's feelings. She is not acting by design, and yet she cannot even be certain to the degree of her own regard, nor of its reasonableness. She has known him only a fortnight. She has danced 4 dances with him at Merton. She saw him this morning in his own house, and has since dined with him in the company 4 times. This is not quite enough to make her understand his character. So comfy, makes it fall asleep. That's pretty good. That'd be great if maybe Stream itself did not fall asleep. Not as you represented. Had she merely dined with him, she might have only discovered whether he had a good appetite. But you must remember that 4 evenings have also been spent together, and 4 evenings may do a great deal. Yes, these 4 evenings enabled them to discern that they both like Bunyan better than commerce, but with respect to any other leading characteristic, I do not imagine as much to be unfolded. Well, said Charlotte, I wish Jane success with all my heart, and if she were married to him tomorrow, I should think she was a good chance of happiness if she were to be studying his character for a 12-month. Happiness in a marriage is entirely a matter of chance. If the dispositions of parties are ever so well known to each other, or ever so similar beforehand, it does not advance their facility in the least. They always continue to grow sufficiently unlike afterwards to have their share of vexation, and it's better to know as little as possible the defects of a person whom which you are to pass your life. So, basically, during this part, Charlotte, or Mrs. Lucas, is trying to impress upon Elizabeth Bennet to have it be known, to have Jane be more forthcoming and act that she is in love with Mr. Bingley, maybe even more than she actually is, to hold him down, to secure him. Basically to lock him down, so that he does not seem to be looking for another woman who may be more interested, essentially. And Mrs. Lucas feels that basically, you don't have to be in love to be married. You just, this is your livelihood, and he is the richest man, so you should pick him. And that falling in love, that degree of it may happen later. An understanding of being, yes, well, they vex me in some way, shape, or form, learning to love somebody, versus actually being in love with them and then marrying them at the beginning. While Elizabeth is telling Charlotte that basically she would prefer if Jane knows her feelings and knows if she does love Mr. Bingley before pursuing a relationship like that while he is pursuing her. And that's their thing, where she was like, yes, your plan is great. If anybody was looking for a husband, a rich husband, to get rich, to not have to worry about your life anymore, and not necessarily for love. And she would be like, then I would listen to you. But this is Jane, and Jane wants to marry for love, not just because she's the eldest daughter. And that's why. Especially because Charlotte feels like, oh, they've spent 4 nights together. 4 nights together, they could already be fucking married. Oh, hello. Hi. Did the stream go down again? Yeah. Okay, great book. Okay, good. I was like, oh no. Did the stream go down again? Dang it. No, it's been behaving itself. Good stream. Good stream. Good chat. Everybody gets head pet. You make me laugh, Charlotte, but it is not sound. You know it's not sound, and that you would never act in this way yourself. Occupied in observing Mr. Bingley's attention to her sister, Elizabeth was far from suspecting that she herself was becoming the object of some interest in the eyes of his friend, Mr. Darcy. Had at first scarcely allowed her to be pretty. He had looked at her without admiration at the ball, and when they next met, he looked at her only to criticize. But no sooner had he made it clear to himself and to his friends that she hardly had a good future in her face, than he began to find that he was rendered uncommonly intelligent by the beautiful expression of her dark eyes. To this discovery succeeded in others equally mortifying, though he had detected, with a critical eye, more than one failure of the perfect symmetry in her form. He was forced to acknowledge her figure to be light and pleasing, and in spite of his asserting that her manners were not those of a fashionable world, he was caught by their easy playfulness. Of this she was perfectly unaware. To her he was the only man who made himself agreeable nowhere, and who had not thought her handsome enough to dance with. I just got distracted by British reactions to modern day rituals. Yes. So, I think it's very funny because Elizabeth, tells Charlotte, oh, well, you wouldn't act this way yourself. You would not conduct yourself in this way. Yet you're giving this advice to Jane just because you want her to marry a rich husband. And, just kind of shrugged off. But little does Elizabeth know that even though Mr. Darcy said that she was tolerable and that he'd find her wanting in many ways, that she wasn't as beautiful, that she wasn't as intelligent, as talented, blah 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 blah, of like all the other girls and wherever the fuck he came from, that now he is haunted by the fact that he has caught feelings, that he now finds a playfulness in her sharp tongue and in her demeanor, that he finds her witty, and that she is, even though she is not perfectly symmetrical, which, to be fair, no woman fucking is, Darcy, you dumbass. Everybody's got asymmetry in their face. Ain't nobody perfectly symmetrical without like surgery or some shit, dude. I'm gonna need you to calm down. That her face is not so terrible. She is very light. She is not overly heavy. She is well fit. And now he's like, oh no, oh no, I'm starting to like her. Yeah, the original student there. He is starting to like her. He is like, oh no, oh no, oh no, I hate this. I can't let her know that I like her, because I kind of was an asshole. No. But that her feelings have not changed. She was just like, that dude was an asshole. I would not like him. I would not like him with the fox. I would not like him with the box. I will not like him here or there. I will not like that bitch anywhere. Because that's her. She was like, I'm still mad. I'm still mad because he told me I wasn't pretty. Fuck him. He began to wish to know more of her, and as a step towards conversing with her himself, attended to her conversation with others. His doing so drew her notice. It was that Sir William Lucas's, where a large party was assembled. What does Mr. Darcy mean, said she to Charlotte, by listening to my conversation with Colonel Foster? That's a question Mr. Darcy can only answer. But if he does it any more, I shall certainly let him know that I see what he is doing about his very satirical eye, and if I do not begin by being impertinent myself, I shall soon grow afraid of him. On this approaching them soon afterwards, through without seeming to have any intention of speaking, Miss Lucas defied her friend to mention she had such a subject to him, which immediately provoked Elizabeth to do so. She turned to him and said, Did you not think, Mr. Darcy, that I can express myself uncommonly well just now, when I was teasing Colonel Foster to give us a ball for Merton? with great energy, but it does always subject, which makes a lady energetic. You are severe on us. It will be her soon to be tea. It will be her soon to be tea, said Miss Lucas. I'm going to open the instrument, Eliza, and you know what follows. You're a strange creature by way of a friend, always wanting me to play and sing before everyone and anybody. If my vanity had taken a musical turn, you would have been invaluable. But as it is, I would rather not sit down before those who make the habit of hearing the very best performers. On Miss Lucas's preserving, however, she added, "Very well, if it must be so, it must," gravely glancing at Mr. Darcy. "There is a fine old saying, which everybody here is of course familiar with. Keep your breath to cool your porridge, and I shall keep mine to swell my song."
Thank you so much, Wavy. Wavy for 9 months. Stream baby. 9 months. 9 kisses. There you go. There you go.
So I love that this is, basically her and Charlotte still gossiping. This time gossiping about the fact that, Elizabeth has noticed that Mr. Darcy has started to listen in on her conversations. Is Mr. Darcy the original Soonadair? See, the funny part is, it's 2 Soonadairs. It's two. It's 2 of them, a little bit. So originally, Elizabeth is not one, right? She is perfectly pleasant enough to him, but is insulted by the first one, who was like, "I don't like you. You're not good enough for me," and then catches feelings, Mr. Darcy. But because he insulted her, she has now turned to, "I don't like you. You're awful," but actually hates him. Not like a real hate, but that bitch sort of hate. Just kind of bitch. I'll show you. So essentially, the story is 2 Soonadairs falling in love through circumstances. So, yes. And so Elizabeth is complaining about the fact that he's listening in on her conversations and starting to kind of loiter around her and kind of get all up in her bubble. Welcome aboard, smacking thy cheeks to the SS Honorworthy Traveler. Please enjoy vacation. Thank you so much for the follow. And I have smacked a cheek. Granted, that was my face, but it's fine. It's whatever. We are currently doing some ASMR. We are reading Pride and Prejudice, Jane Austen. There is some kind of scratchy noises, occasionally some of these while I'm reading, and a lot of British sounding me doing silly things. And kind of talking and explaining some of the dialogue and whatnot, because I understand it's a little hard for people to digest if they're not 100% knowing the lingo or understanding the social, geopolitical, positional crap. So basically, what the story has been so far is that Elizabeth Bennet went to a dance with her family because Mr. Bingley had moved into town, and he is a man of much money, and Mrs. Bennet, Elizabeth and Jane's mom, really wants one of the daughters to marry him. And now I have a purr. I will purr after this small explanation. After they have danced together, Mr. Bingley has seemingly fallen smitten with Jane, the eldest Bennet child, and they seem to get along quite well. Well, Mr. Bingley has an even richer friend named Mr. Darcy, and he does not like anybody so far during the story. And he insults Elizabeth to her face, And she decides she detests him, for he is awful and he insulted her and her pride. And after insulting Elizabeth and spending more time with her and Jane, because Jane and Mr. Bingley, his best friend, are basically courting each other, but unofficially, he goes, "Oh no, I am starting to catch feelings for Mrs. Elizabeth. Fuck." And in doing so, because he has made it perfectly clear that he cannot just approach her by herself, that he must loiter around her conversations. And she has found that she finds it rather annoying and would like to be rid of him. And so she decides to basically state her opinion about it to her friend, Charlotte, Mrs. Lucas. And she talks shit about him right in front of him, and then turns around and just kind of smears his face in it just a little bit. But it's more of like a light insult, like a playful insult, rather than actually just like dragging his ass. And that's what so far that we've gotten to is that she is just kind of she's kind of lightly teasing him for lingering in on her conversations.
Hello, Black guy. Hello. Also, now the purr is here.
Welcome, Star Chaser. Star Taser? Start Taser? Taster? Welcome aboard to the SS Honorly Traveler. Please enjoy your vacation. Thank you so much for the follow. I appreciate it.
There is cute purr now. Okay.
Back to the story.
Back to Mrs. Bennet
And Mr. Darcy. You're a very strange creature, by the way of a friend. Always wanted me to play. Oh, yes. During this part, basically, Mrs. Lucas has asked Lizzie to play on the harpsichord. Thank you so much, Cool Point, for 14 pebbles. I appreciate it. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you for stopping by, Ranko. I appreciate it. I hope you have sweet dreams. Thank
you. It's okay. Dragon, it's fine. Honestly, I'm not surprised people fall asleep. That tends to happen. I just enjoy reading the story. So, basically, Miss Lucas, or Charlotte, has asked Lizzie to play the harpsichord, and Lizzie is quite essentially saying that, "Oh no, you drag me to make me play in front of God and everyone and anyone, and if I was actually good at music, I wouldn't mind, but I guess I must endure, I must entertain you in such a way."
Okay.
The 3DO cord fell out. I hope it's okay.
It's 94. Thank you for 8 months. 8 months. And thank you, Alcatraz Nevermore, for the stretchy stretch. I'll be getting that just in a hot second. They were nominated like a 4-course meal. Look, it's because you guys are such big snacks. God, I wish,
You know what? One of the things I want to do for the next model is to get like one of the like a little smug, like finger gun under the chin emote. You know that one? Just like, I want to get that, but like get it rigged. So it'd be like, cause y'all snacks, and I'm just, cause I do it IRL. But you guys can't see that. You guys can't see the like the smug finger gun under the chin. Just like, ee. Yeah, but like, I want to actually get it rigged to my model. Needs to be winking at the same time.
Okay. Stretchy. Stretchy. Oh, don't kick the computer. Pearl, no kick computer. It's a bad idea. Make loud angry sound. Don't want to have angry sound. Comfy. Comfy. Oh, I just cracked my neck.
Oh Lord, she be popping, knocking and dropping.
Ow. But anyway, thank you guys so much for the stretch. For me to keep my posture somewhat good. I appreciate it.
Alright, so we said here, her performance was pleasing, though by no means capital. After a song or two, and before she could reply to the entries of several that she would sing again, she was eagerly succeeded at the instrument by her sister Mary, who, having, in consequence of being only plain one in the family, worked hard for the knowledge and accomplishments, was always impatient for display. Mary had neither genius nor taste, though vanity had given her an application. It had given her likewise a pedantic air and a conceited manner, which would have injured a higher degree of excellence than she had reached. Elizabeth, easy and unaffected, had listened to with much more pleasure, though not playing half so well, and Mary, at the end of a long concerto, was glad to purchase praise and gratitude by the Scotch and Irish airs, at the request of her younger sister, whom with some of the Lucases and 2 or 3 officers joined eagerly in dancing, one at the end of the room. Mr. Darcy stood near them in silent indignation at such a mode of passing the evening, to the exclusion of all conversation, and was much too engrossed by his thoughts to perceive that Sir William Lucas was his neighbour, till Sir William thus began, What charming amusement for the young people in this, Mr. Darcy! There is nothing like dancing, after all. I consider it to be one of the most refinements of both posh society. Certainly, sir. And it was the advantage of also being the vogue amongst less. Okay, here we go. Certainly, sir. And it is the advantage of also being in vogue amongst the less posh societies of the world. Every savage can dance. Sir William only smiled. Your friend performs delightfully. he continued after a pause on seeing Bingley drawing through. "And I doubt that you are adept in the science yourself, Mr. Darcy. You saw me dance in Merton, I believe, sir." "Yes, indeed. You received no inconsiderable pleasure from the slight. Do you often dance at St. James?" "Never, sir." "Do you think that it would be a proper compliment to the place?" "It is a compliment which I never pay to any place, if I can avoid it." "You have a house in town, I conclude." Mr. Darcy bowed. I think you'll need to add one twinkling gun under your chin. Yeah, you know what? Just be like, E. With a single one, so I can wink it. I can be like, E. But you know what? That would be pretty good. That'd be pretty good. I will keep that for further development. I will mark that. Mock me. I will mark it. So, you're probably going to fall asleep in this without realizing. Oh no, how terrible. Mock Pearl time. No, I meant Mark. M-A-R-K. Just with an accent. Though granted, Weishi, when do you not mock me? Dang, Pearl doing finger guns. Only underneath my chin, and only one. I don't want to steal Vivi's thunder from down under. That's her bottle of lightning. When I'm going to sleep. So go to sleep. Go to sleep. Go to sleep. Go to fucking bed. Go to fucking bed. I think maybe me being enthusiastic of my new hand upgrades. Just all of a sudden, just pew 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 pew. You have to get all three of them. I need Vivi to stand behind me with two finger guns out, and then me with the one under the chin, and then it is perfection. We have achieved full finger gun mode. It's an excellent idea. No, I'm still streaming. I'm still streaming. I don't know why. Like on OBS on my side, nothing has changed. Nothing came. Like I don't know why Twitch being weird. Why is Twitch being weird? Stop breaking. Twitch, stop breaking. Welcome back, everybody. I'm sorry. Twitch is throwing a tantrum. Twitch just wants attention. It's like, you're not paying attention to me, Pearl. You're paying attention to chat and Jane Austen, but not me. Not me. Okay, so basically the last paragraph section was quite literally Elizabeth goes to play the harpsichord with her friend Charlotte, who is insisted, and she's okay. She's passable at it, like not the best, but not terrible, just enough to like get across. Because basically back in those days, as a woman, you had to like be able to paint, able to embroider, sew, play the harpsichord, play some sort of fucking instrument. You had to have like 17 different talents just to be considered a proper lady. So Elizabeth can passively play the harpsichord. And now, while this is happening, Mr. Darcy has unfortunately found himself in the company of Sir William Lucas specifically. And Sir William Lucas is telling him, oh, how do you find the party? And goes, well, why don't you dance? Dancing is obviously the. But Pearla's marriageable. Are you saying I'm wife material? I'm waifu material. Because that's what this dress made out of. It's made out of white material. Otter material. But basically, he's talking about, the marking of a polite society is the ability to have civilized dancing. And Mr. Darcy replies, well, it also marks an uncivilized society because he says even savages can dance. And to which Mr. Lucas is very, just turns on the dime and goes, well, your friend dances well, why don't you dance? He's like, you danced at, Merton's. And he goes, Mr. Darcy says, essentially, I only dance when I have to because I do not find any place agreeable and I do not find many partners agreeable. It's true, I do have my own coat. It's amazing. That's why we were endangered. Just like the best kind of coat. You can make like a lot of good things out of this. I am thick with like 3 Z's when you talk about my hair follicles. Hello. Darcy has a bit of a complex. Yeah, Darcy's got something all right. Okay, and I do believe I should do the Ashawat noise, just Asha, 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 Everyone's coming on, so that's this last nice night. Bye bye. Bye bye, Ion. Enjoy your time with your friend. Bye bye. You're gonna grab your otter oodie. Like an otter hoodie. Yeah, I've had glasses on this entire time. I wanted people to look at my glasses. Looking at some very cute glasses. But yeah, why do I not just name my streams Otter Cheddar? You know what? Maybe I'll call it Otter Chatter when I do a just chatting stream. But I like to put puns in all of my titles, except for usually the snooze crews, the just basic ones, because that's kind of chat's choice of like what I do or what I use or what I say or what I sing. Pearl Merchman. Someday I would like it, but I'm not quite sure how to go about it yet. It's a lot of work and stuff.
but maybe someday. Maybe. Let's see. Artifact, artifact. Here comes an artifact, artifact, artifact. I hope that you like it. Okay, so here is a fun artifact. Did you know that otters only have a 6-month pregnancy? That's right. That's how come they can have pups at least twice a year. They can have babies twice a year. Artifact, artifact. That was your artifact. Artifact, artifact. I hope that you liked it. And thank you, Sirius, for the atawata. But Mr. Darcy was basically talking about the fact that he'd rather not dance. Though it seems that Mr. William Lucas, really wants him to. I look dignified, thank you. They make me smarter and able to read better.
I had once thought of fixing town myself, for I am fond of superior society, but I didn't quite well certain that the air of London would agree with Lady Lucas. He had paused in hopes of an answer, but his companion was not disposed to make any, and Elizabeth, at the instant moving towards them, he was struck with the action of doing a very gallant thing, and called out to her, "My dear Miss Eliza, why are you not dancing? Mr. Darcy, you must allow me to present this young lady to you as a very desirable partner. You cannot refuse a dance, I am sure, when so much beauty is before you." And taking her hand, he would have given it to Mr. Darcy, who, though extremely surprised, was not unwilling to receive it, when she instantly drew back and said, with some discomposure, to Sir William, "Indeed, sir, I have not the least intention of dancing. I entreat you not to suppose that I moved this way in order to beg for a partner." Mr. Darcy, with grave propriety, requested to be allowed the honour of her hand, but in vain. Elizabeth was determined, nor did Sir William at all shake her purpose by his attempt at persuasion. "You excel so much in the dance, Miss Eliza, that it is cruel to deny me the happiness of seeing you. As though this gentleman dislikes the amusement in general, he can have no objection, I am sure, to oblige us for 1/2 hour." "Mr. Darton is all politeness," said Elizabeth, smiling. "He is indeed, but considering the inducement, my dear Eliza, we cannot wonder at his complaisance, for who would object to such a partner?" Elizabeth looked archly and turned away. Her resistance had not injured her with the gentleman, and he was thinking of her with some complacency, thus accosted by Mrs. Bingley. "I can guess the subject of your revere. I should imagine not. You are considering how insupportable it would be to pass many evenings in the manner, in society, and I indeed am quite of your opinion. I was never more annoyed. The insipidity, and yet the noise, and the nothingness, and the self-importance of all those people. What would I give to hear your strictures on them?"
Are we your otter pups? No, I don't think you're my children. You're my passengers. You're passengers and sailors. You are people aboard a cruise for a good time. Do you think that skin on Pearl Otter's face is only skin colored fur there? No, it's skin. That's why I'm an otter girl. There's also some form of human here. I don't think it would be twice as soft either. I feel like it would be significantly less soft as its skin. But good try. But what if we stowed away? Then that makes you a stowaway. Well, thank you. I am utterly adorable. I would like to say that I am an adorable girl.
adore a pearl, as was coined by Elle, one of my very sweet people. All right. So essentially, what's happening here is that Sir William Lucas is, what do I do with stowaways? We generally just say hi to them and feed them. We make them passengers. That's what happens. You upgrade to the passenger plus. And then sometimes we pay you and you pay us to work. The lobsters. It's okay. It's a cruise ship that constantly gets more people. We always gotta get to building. Anyway, essentially what's happening in this chapter section, no, we feed the lobsters to me, or we feed the lobsters to you. We don't feed you to the lobsters. You eat the lobster. That's how that works. It's fair. It's not too hard. Stowaways get fed instead of the mods. No. Moda gets fed. It's usually like a pack of onions and pretzel sticks, and that's about it. But, so, Sir William Lucas is talking to Mr. Darcy and really wants him to dance and wants him to be, like, somehow more sociable. So he calls Elizabeth Bennet, who is moving currently towards them. And the souls of the unit, a bagel. No, it goes, no, 2 bagels. He stops her and is like, oh, well, Mr. Darcy, you can't deny a dance when there's Miss Elizabeth Bennet here. She's so beautiful. I mean, she is a great dancer. You say that you can dance well. I mean, obviously you should dance together. He's kind of matchmaking them, just, trying to make it more sociable for the evening, because Mr. Darcy is literally standing around and being just like a giant sourpuss. And Elizabeth doesn't know that Mr. Darcy has already decided that he is quite infatuated with her. So she, of course, takes her hand away quickly and goes, I would be if he would want to dance, but don't suppose that I came over here to beg for him to dance with me. I was on my way to do something else or such. And, of course, Mr. Lucas goes, no, of course not. But you're so beautiful, and you're right here, and why not? Why don't you? And takes her hand and puts it in Mr. Darcy's hand again. And Mr. Darcy is more like, I suppose it wouldn't be terrible for me to dance with you. Most captains I've seen on movies and games get them worked on their place for the ship when they find stowaways. Some do. You guys become passengers. You guys pay to work. It's the weirdest part. Yeah, don't worry. It's a weird cruise. We're aware. Trying to figure out where we were. Here. I can guess the subject of your review. I should imagine not. You are considering how insupportable it would be to pass many evenings in manner in such society. Again, I'm quite fond of your opinion. Okay, here we go. Essentially, at this point in here, they are talking about, the fact that he's a sourpuss, and that she's still a little salty about the fact that he called her not that pretty and that he didn't want to dance with her the first time. But yet now he wants to dance with her. She's still a little salty. So she's making more of a, they're making more of a comment about that. Your conjecture is totally wrong, I assure you. My mind was egregiously engaged. I've been meditating now on a very great pleasure of a fair, fine eyes in the face of a pretty woman can bestow. Miss Bingley immediately fixed her eyes on his face, and desired that he would tell her what lady had the credit of inspiring such reflections. Mr. Darcy replied with great intrepidity, Miss Elizabeth Bennet. Miss Elizabeth Bennet, replied Miss Bingley, I am in astonishment. How long has she been a favourite? Pray, when am I to wish you joy? That is the exact question I wish you would ask. A lady's imagination is very rapid. It jumps from admiration to love, from love to matrimony in a moment. I knew you would be wishing me for joy. Nay, if you are serious about it, I shall consider the matter absolutely settled. You will have a charming mother-in-law indeed, and of course you will always be at Pemberley with you. He listened to her with a perfect indifference while she chose to entertain herself with his manner, and his composure evicted to her was safe, her wit flowing warm. So, basically, she walks off because she doesn't want to dance with him. And you've done figured out and keeping up appearances. Yeah, a lot of it is keeping up appearances. So essentially, Elizabeth has walked off after her being like, you would never want to spend an evening. You feel like all of this is folly and whatnot. Nobody's worth your time, and it's too loud and too noisy, and you are too self-important to enjoy it with all the little people, right? And so she walks off. So he has a talk with Mrs. Bingley, one of the sisters of his party, and he is just watching Eliza as she walks off, and Miss Elizabeth as she walks off, and he does not stop looking at her, and he talks about it. Basically to her being like, I like Miss Bennet, and she is taken back. She's like, oh, really? You like her? How long? When did you figure it out? Oh my God, are you going to get married? Because, that's the only thing that they're to think about is, as a woman, you fall in love with a man, quote unquote, you get married to him, you have babies, that's the long and short of it. That's the whole thing. And he is telling her, this is the problem with women. You jump from the, oh, I find you pretty, or oh, I like you, to like to love to matrimony, children, all in an instant. Which is really funny considering the fact that this is a society, literally, yeah, the social context clockwork is ticking. Yeah, and they kind of pressed this onto them. So he's getting mad at something they can't control because that's literally how society fucking works. So I'm like, Mr. Darcy, what the fuck? Smell like communism. Wait, did Twitch lose its shit for like a minute? Did you guys hear any of that? Of what we were talking about? Twitch, why do you do this to me? Alright. So, essentially, he tells Mrs. Bingley, one of the sisters, to his friend Mr. Bingley, that he likes, or is at least interested in Miss Bennet. Small hiccup, yeah. That he is at least somewhat interested in her. And she is like, oh my God, how maybe, okay, only 20 seconds, okay, fine, okay, yeah, alright, so that means you guys heard all that part. So basically, he is telling her, oh, how silly you are for going from like to love to matrimony to baby, but yet that's literally how society has grown up. Like, this is the social construct shit that everybody has to deal with. So he feels that he is above such things, that, you know, it doesn't matter to him, it doesn't apply to him. And basically, he just ignores her for the rest of the evening, quote unquote, while she entertains herself with, talking about, oh, he's gonna get married, they're gonna have beautiful babies, blah 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 blah. And big brained, yeah, he just shuts up. He just stops talking and just lets her go on and just starts ignoring her. We live in a society. We do. We do. We live in a society. Holy shit. And it seems that we will pretty much be on chapter 7, because I don't think I can quite read all of this in 15. I could maybe do it. You know what? Fuck it. We'll try. Mr. Bennet properly consisted of almost entirely an estate of 2,000 a year, which, unfortunately for his daughters, was entailed into default to heirs male on a distant relation, and their mother's fortune, though ample for her situation in life, could but ill supply the deficiency of his. Her father had been an attorney in Merton, and left her £4,000. She had a sister married to Mr. Phillips, who had been a clerk of her father, and succeeded him in the business, and a brother settled in London, in a respectable line of trade. The village of Longbourn was 1 mile away from Merton, a most convenient distance for the young ladies, who were usually tempted thither 3 or 4 times a week, to pay their duty to their aunt in the miller's shop just over the way. The 2 youngest of the family, Catherine and Lydia, were particularly frequent in these intentions, their minds more vacant than their sisters'. And when nothing better offered, a walk to Merton was necessary to amuse their morning hours and to flourish conversation for the evening, and however bare of news of the country in general might be, they always contrived to learn more from their aunt. At present, indeed, they were well supplied with news and happiness by the recent arrival of a militia regiment in the neighbourhood. It was to remain the whole winter, and Merton was the headquarters. Their visits to Mrs. Phillips were now productive of the most interesting intelligence. Every day added something to their knowledge of the officers' names and their connections. Their lodgings were long secret, and at length they began to know the officers themselves. Mr. Phillips visited them all, and opened to his nieces a store of felicity unknown before. They could talk of nothing but the officers, and Mr. Bingley's large fortune, the mention of which gave animation to their mother, was worthless in their eyes when opposed to the regiments of officers. Thank you for the pants. Also, thank you so much for the stretchy stretch. After listening one morning to their effusions on the subject, Mr. Bennet coolly observed, "From all I can collect your manner of talking, you must be the 2 silliest girls in the country. I have suspected more time now, but I am now convinced." Catherine was disconcerted and made no answer, but Lydia, with a perfect indifference, continued to express her admiration for Captain Carter, and her hope of seeing him in the course the next day, as he was going the next morning to London. "I am astonished, my dear," said Mrs. Bennet, "that you so readily think your children silly. If I wish to thinking slightly of anybody's children, it shall not be of my own, however. If my children are silly, I must hope them to always be sensible of it." "Yes, but as it happens, they're all of them very clever." "This is the one point I flatter myself on, which we do not agree. I had hoped that our sentiments coincided in this particular. But I myself fairer differ to you, as our 2 youngest daughters are uncommonly foolish." "My dear Mr. Bennet, you cannot expect such girls to have senses as the father and mother. When they get to our age, I dare say they will not think about officers any more than we do. I remember the time at which I liked a red coat myself." Very well, and indeed I do still so at my heart. If a smart young colonel with 5 or 6 thousand a year should want one of my girls, I shall not say nay to him. And I thought that Colonel Foster looked very becoming the girls the other night, and so really, and his regimentals.
Mamma, cried Lydia, my aunt says that Colonel Foster and Captain Carter do not go so often to Miss Watson as they did when they first came. She sees them now very often standing in Clark's library.
Mrs. Bennet was prevented from replying the entrance of the footman with a note for Mrs. Bennet. It came from Netherfield, and the servant waited for an answer. Mrs. Bennet's eyes sparkled with pleasure, as she was eagerly calling out while her daughter read. "Well, Jane, who is it from? What is it about? What does it say? Well, Jane, make us haste. Tell us, make haste, my love."
"It's from Mr. Bingley," said Jane, as she read it out loud. "My dear friend, if you are not so compassionate as to dine with Louisa and me, we shall be in danger of hating each other for the rest of our lives, for a whole day's tete-a-tete between two women can never end without a quarrel. Come as soon as you can, to only be on the receipt of this. My brother and the gentlemen are to dine with the officers. Yours ever, Caroline Bingley." "With the officers!" said Lydia. "I wanted my aunt to tell us that."
"Dining out," said
"Dining out," said Mrs. Bennet. "This is very unlucky." "Can I have the carriage?" said Jane.
"No, my dear, you must better go on horseback."
"Oh, wait, no, this is Miss Bennet. No, my dear, you had better go on horseback, because it seems likely to rain, and then you must stay the night."
"That would be a good scheme, mamma, if you were sure they had not offered to send her home."
"Oh, but a gentleman will have Mr. Bingley's chaise to go to Merton, and hers to have no horses in theirs. I'd much rather go in a coach."
"But, my dear, your father cannot spare the horses. I'm sure they are wanted in but the farm, Mr. Bennet, are they not?" "They are wanted for the farm much oftener than I can get them." "But if you got them today," said Elizabeth, "Mother Purpose will be answered."
She did at the last extort from her father an acknowledgment that the horses were engaged. Jane was therefore obliged to go on horseback, and her mother attended her to the door with many cheerful prognostics of a bad day. Her hopes were answered. Jane had not been gone long before it started to rain hard. Her sisters were uneasy for her, but her mother was delighted. The rain continued the whole evening without intermission. Jane certainly could not come back.
"'Twas a lucky day of mine, indeed," said Mrs. Bennet more than once, as the credit of making the rain were all her own. To next morning, however, she was not aware of all the felicity in her contrivance. Breakfast was scarcely over when a servant from Netherfield brought the following note for Elizabeth.
"My dearest Lizzie, I find myself very unwell this morning, which I suppose is to be imputed by my getting wet throughout yesterday. My kind of friends will not hear of my returning until I am better. They insist also on seeing my Mr. Jones, therefore do not be alarmed if I should hear of this being to me. And excepting a sore throat and a headache, there is not much the matter with me. Yours, etc."
Well, my dear, said Mr. Bennet, when Elizabeth had read the note out loud, if your daughter should have the dangerous fit of illness, and if she should die, it would be in the comfort known as all in the pursuit of Mr. Bingley, under your orders."
"Oh, I'm not afraid of her dying. People do not die of trifling colds. She'll be taken care of as long as she stays there. It's all very well and good. I would go and see her myself if I could have the carriage."
Elizabeth, feeling really anxious, was determined to go to her through the carriage was not to be had, and as she was no horsewoman, walking was her only alternative. She declared her resolution.
"How can you be so silly," cried her mother, "as to think of such a thing in this dirt? You will not be fit to be seen when you get there."
"I shall be very fit to see Jane, which is all I want."
All right. I think we're going to end the story there for now. Not quite to chapter 8.
but we are about 5 minutes before I want to end stream, so we'll just have to make do with that. And I will mark our book on page 222. Wasn't that 222 perfect? It's nice to... This has been really nice. I've enjoyed doing the reading, and I enjoy the idea of doing it again. Maybe not quite next ASMR stream, but definitely at least next month, and return to doing once a month ASMR kind of like book club. So thank you everybody who hung out. I really appreciate it. Now it's time for me to look at, who else is doing some ASMR that maybe we could raid, because I want to do comfy to comfy communication, see how well that goes. Let's see, we're gonna do a little bit of typing ASMR. Ooh, putting you guys on the book so that I can find somebody else. Yep, comfy to comfy communication, and I'd like it to be a VTuber specifically. I feel like that's just, just the nicest thing to do is VTuber. VTuber. Show me the VTuber. I see that there is Dreamcatcher, who is currently going. Why does it not want to add the tag for VTuber? Let's go with auditory ASMR and give me VTuber tag. There's VTuber tag. Alright, well, we'll just go to Dreamcatcher. I feel like that's good, because I think the other one speaks Spanish, and I don't know them. Yeah, I'm gonna be leaving. I've got, if you're gonna be up still, I've got a Phantasmo collab with my hamster Mayu and Vivi for later, but I have to get ready for that. So we will be rating comfy to comfy communication with the Dreamcatcher. Let's go with Snooze Cruise raid / raid Dreamcatcher. And we'll go ahead and do a Pearl Peekaboo and do comfy to comfy communication. Do a little salute, and then do say sleepy sailors boarding. Sleepy sailors boarding. And then another Pro Peekaboo. There we go. Comfy to comfy communication. There we go. There's our raid message. If you are still awake enough to do the raid message, thank you guys so much for hanging out. I really do appreciate it. I hope you guys have a wonderful night. Please enjoy sweet dreams. Thank you. This has been a wonderful reading. Thank you. And we'll continue next time. Bye bye.